Hello. If you're out there and you can hear us, please let us know, because we should hopefully be live, God's willing. Hello. Let me make sure I open my
Happy
stuff.
birthday, dear Sotek.
Okay, Twitch. Twitch looks
Happy
good.
birthday to you.
And how are we looking on? We're looking great on YouTube. Excellent. So we are live, large, and in charge here today, which is good shit.
Marvelous. So, I am going to open with a very obvious opening, which is to say, happy birthday to the bestest Loremasterist of Sotekists that there are out there. He has been providing us with all manner of fun and insightful lore snippets these last few, well, it's almost a decade now you've been doing it, isn't it?
Maybe
getting closer.
If so, I don't think I want to know that.
Yeah, okay, so let's just say it's been a few years. And I have been doing it with him now for the last year and a tiny little bit, and I am delighted to say that it is my second opportunity to say happy birthday to the glorious, most beardiest of them all, Mr. Loremaster of Sotek. And on that, I would like to say, if you are out there, do please say happy birthday to him as well. If you're in a position to do so and would like to throw super chats in his direction, today is the day to do it. If you would like to subscribe to his channel, do subscribe. If you would like to just throw money at him for no reason other than to say thanks very much, Sotek, for all of your awesome contributions to whatever it is that you think he is the best at doing, whether it's playing Final Fantasy or Total War Warhammer, or indeed just chatting with me about Lori bits. Do say thank you to him today. So don't just say happy birthday, do say thanks, even if it's just a quick thanks, Sotek, in the comments, because that's enormously appreciated, because he is the awesomest.
Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Yeah, this should be kind of a fun, exciting week. I am almost sure what I want to do for Wednesday. I'm kicking around like a couple little ideas where we'll continue with
after the stream.
Yeah, we'll figure that out because I've had a couple of thoughts just kicking around. But I'm really excited for today. I celebrated with my family yesterday, which was quite nice, and the actual day itself is this Wednesday. But went ahead and celebrated with family, all that stuff, and got some new books, which is exciting. Got some more AOS books, but I also got the Arcane Journal for the Empire, so I was flipping through that. And that's actually one of the better Arcane Journals. It actually has some stuff going on in it, instead of like the other ones. They've been slowly getting better, even though I do hope at some point we go back to just like regular army books. Would make me so happy. But anyway.
So, before we dive in, I would just like to say, for all the people out there, it's okay to not throw money. Just saying thanks is the best. Do just say happy birthday or some equivalent in the chat. It'll be enormously appreciated. And indeed, thanks for that, Jeff. It is very nice for you to say so. Might I also say that the topic today was not thrown out to all of you to choose. It was chosen by the birthday boy himself. So on that, what topic did you choose?
Today, because I've tried putting him through on votes twice and he narrowly lost both times, so I decided, fuck it. We're going with Morghur the Shadowgave, also known as the Master of Skulls.
Master of Skulls.
Because I absolutely adore him, and I feel like he's a really underappreciated character, and the wikis are surprisingly bad about not having all of his info, so a lot of people don't really appreciate kind of like how big and complex of a character he is. So I'm really looking forward to getting into him, because his story stretches a lot further than a lot of people realize, and has a lot of really fascinating implications that also people don't realize. And a lot of people are like, oh, he's just a Beastman. It's like, no, he's so much bigger than that. He's so much bigger than that. And I'm really eager to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one as well, because it's a character that I have particular fondness for all that, unlike many of the cards we've covered, this one's relatively new. So looking forward to this one. By relatively new, I mean like it's only a couple of decades or so old. Unlike some of the others we've been covering lately, though, where they might span all the way back to the first edition Warhammer, this one most certainly doesn't. But it's a character who has fascinating implications, and I'm particularly looking forward to discussing him. So I am delighted that Sotek has brought him up as his birthday topic of choice.
Yep, should be a really, really cool time. Only other things is that I guess we'll go ahead and knock out just like some super chat stuff that came in early. And thank you very much, Lord Chris, by the way, for the 10 gifted subs. I really appreciate that on Twitch. Thank you so much. So let's go ahead and get through these and then get into it, because I'm really, really eager to talk a lot about this guy today, because this is a character that has a very interesting relationship with Games Workshop as well, because of how he's evolved over the years, which will be just really interesting to talk about. So, Laughing God, happy birthday, Sotek. Here's to many more, you beautiful soul. Well, thank you. Yes, I do hope I am in for quite a few many more. I've had an okay ride so far, and I'm not ready to get off yet. Where's that Morky Bishop? Did Malagor and Morghur ever meet? Not that we're aware of, but as we'll talk about when we go through the stream, it is very likely they have. It's very likely most Beastman characters have met him, but it's not something that is talked about a lot, and we'll get into that as we go. Magladrod, happy birthday, Almighty Sotek. Do you think there's a link between Morghur and other gods of hunger and aspects like the spider god? I'm going to say no. As we get into it, Morghur is not a... Morghur is... I can see why you're saying that, because of the whole, like, god-eater aspect, but when we get into it, I don't think it's so much about hunger in that traditional sense, as, like, an all-consuming beast, and it's more something else you'll see. You'll see.
Yeah. Agreed in that one completely. He's a character who has particular appetites, but those appetites are driven towards a particular end.
Yep, Ricky Chapman, gather around the herd stones, gores. The shamans have a story to tell of the great mutator. I like that you went with that version of great instead of the normal, because it makes it more like he's like a mutator, but he's like a cheese grater. But mutator, he's giving out little slices of mutation to everybody. Jorgen, which god do you think would taste the most like birthday cake? And happy birthday.
Sweet.
I feel like it would either be like Slanesh or maybe a Thardy.
So, the temptation.
Or one of the halfling gods, maybe?
Yeah, sure. Go for Esmeralda.
Hard to say. Biful Culking, thank you very much for the happy birthday message. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Warranty Crescent, he ain't a long beard that wouldn't touch the ground if he was lying on his face. Well, my beard grows in hideously, so I have to keep it at a decent maintenance level. But thank you very much.
Mine just goes, so I have to shave the frickin' thing every other day.
I wish that was my problem.
Yeah.
Maybe it will be my problem in the years to come. Morbrek, hey, happy birthday, Loremaster of Sotek. Thank you very much. Thank you for all the great videos and streams. That's my... I'm not going to make that joke. Moving on. Hello there. Since I cannot be starting of a Valentine's Day episode, my very serious question comes early. Do Miao Ying and Yin Yin carry their kids themselves? And if yes, do the kids hatch from eggs? Would they carry the kids themselves? Probably yes. Would they be eggs? Probably no. Because I
think we answered this.
Yeah, we tackled this in the...
So I asked this directly to Andy some time ago over on a stream just before Total War 3 came out, because over on Inside the Rookery we did a stream about 3 days before the game was released, and this was one of the questions that came up, and I can't recall what answer we landed on back then, but it was definitely something. I'm going to have to go look it up again, because it's been a while since I watched that.
I'm pretty sure it's they procreate in a human form, and so they go through the process as a human, and so it's all human. Everything you would expect from a human happens. I think they would have to genuinely like mate with a dragon in order to have eggs, like actual dragon kiddos, because their kids, all of their children are human with dragon blood, as opposed to being like
dragon blood is sugar good.
Some other stuff. Cole Patterson, happy birthday. Is this your way of saying that you're an incarnation of Morghur? Thankfully, I'm not. If so, you're the most impressive by far. Also, the wiki makes me cry so bad. I mean, sometimes it has its moments, but every once in a while I'll come across an article that makes me pleased because it'll mention something and be like from White Dwarf such and such. I'm like, oh, okay, I could go look that up now. And it'll help me find a White Dwarf that I want to collect. Most of the time that's not the case, but every once in a while there's a gem lying around in there somewhere.
Yep, agreed.
Kobo, thank you very much for the happy birthday message. Really appreciate it. Kornshima, if Morghur can somehow eat all the Warhammer gods, can he go powerful enough to eat Chaos gods? Yes and no. We'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah.
I would say that would fall very much under yes but or no but. Jonathan Scott, Morghur, how about Lesker? Also, happy B-Day. Yes, Lesker is probably better for the palate. Psych, happy birthday, Sotek reading Guardians of the Forest. The prologue got me so excited for this book. Yeah, I will never forget reading the Elf Omnibus for the first time, and there being quite what I can only describe as a Morghur jump scare 2/3 of the way through that omnibus.
Surprise, Morghur!
Yeah, I would have loved if he played a bigger role later in the story, but I think they actually used him in a perfect way, because instead of making him like the big bad that is killable and all this stuff, they treat him as this horrifying, awful threat that sets things into motion as opposed to being involved himself. And it works really, really well for a story, as we will discuss. Laughing God, are either of you entering the Black Library open submission? Nope.
No. It has been a long time since I bothered writing bits directly for Games Workshop. So I have no interest at the moment, but you never know. One day I may do it again, but I can't see it happening just now.
Yeah, I think most of the writings that they want for this submission period are 40K, but you can also... Yeah, it's like you could submit, I think, for a very specific Age of Sigmar thing, and I was like, it's whatever.
Nah. Only interested in Warhammer right now.
Yep. I've always found it weird that a solid chunk of Beastmen characters basically aren't technically Beastmen. Happy birthday. Well, I mean, as something we've discussed back during like the Malagor stream and a couple of other places, the term Beastman in and of itself is very misleading.
Yeah, it's amorphous.
Yeah, so like I think it's kind of fitting that a lot of the like big bad Beastman characters you look at when you read, when you're dealing with like Moonclaw, Slugtongue, and Morghur, you're looking at these bizarre entities and you're like, well, those aren't Beastmen. And it goes, well, yeah, but like, what's a Beastman? And they do a good job, I think, of cracking that open. Because it's more about their relationship with chaos as it is with their relationship with like species. It's interesting. I find it interesting. I'm glad it's like that personally. Armand, happy birthday. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Holy Artist. Oh, thank you for the generous cheer, my dude. I appreciate it. Happy birthday, Sotek. I hope to be able to listen to you for a lot more years. Also, Morghur is a good choice because he's underrated and badly made in Total War 3. Yeah, I agree very strongly. Morghur is very interesting in Total War Warhammer 3 because he's one of the very, very few cases in the game where the multiplayer version of the character is excellent. Like he's a good representation of what Morghur should be. And for the multiplayer community, he's really, really awesome. But his campaign side, I really dislike. Because it's because it's
Tell me why. I need to know. Because I don't know this bit.
So the issue that I have with Morghur is that he's based purely on his 7th edition version. So he's a very, very narrow focused character. He's got his one magic item, and he's very pigeonholed into a very specific aspect of the character. I also wasn't a huge fan of the design they went with him because from his chest down, he's just a normal Beastman. I wish they had gone a bit more crazy with him, but he was kind of like a free addition onto the Wood Elf DLC. So he just sort of showed up in a weird sense. Because like when you see his artwork, like if you just Google Morghur and look at his art from like the earlier books, he's a big boy. Like his skull weave goes all the way down to his legs.
All the way down to the ground,
and in Total War, they went with a more contained design. Like he's okay, but he's not my favorite implementation. That's for damn sure. Listener Chris, didn't they add a new special character related to Morghur in the old world? Yes, and we will talk about him later on the stream when we kind of talk more about how he's evolving. Because Morghur made a very big reappearance of a sort in Age of Sigmar and was kind of a major character and kind of still is. And then in the old world, the only thing we know about the Beastmen so far is that Morghur has a prophet right now, which is awesome. And also there is a interesting change to his lore in the old world. It's not gigantic, but it's interesting. Because they actually fix a problem I had with 8th edition, which is that 8th edition fucked up Morghur's story really bad. And now there is something to fix it, which I'm looking forward to. Holy Artist, he's a Rostagorian with a crab claw the size of a large Bestigor. Yeah, I feel like there could probably be there are jokes you could absolutely make about Morghur without trying too hard. But and Regalda, thank you very much for the 40 months. Jesus Christ, I've been on Twitch for a while now. So let's get into it.
Alrighty, so this is Sotek's birthday. You may notice that I'm wearing a nice little papery hat in celebration because that's what we do on a birthday. Well,
you got like
really
layers of
I do have layers of hattage going on over here because we all know Warhammer is the game of hats anyway. The bigger your hat, the more awesome you are. And for Beastman, the bigger your... Well, in the case of Morghur, he does still actually have a pretty big hat, particularly with his first artwork, as I recall. His big, like, stacked up thing that was sitting above his head. It was well cool. Anyway, that's by the by. So, because it's Sotek's birthday, I am going to be somewhat short on my introduction today because today it's all about the things that Sotek wants to talk about. Indeed, I am going to take a certain amount of back seating in this one. Going to particularly enjoy doing that while I just listen to him warble on about all the things that are super important to him. But I will open with a few things that are not necessarily super important, but worth pointing out. I didn't read about Morghur until a good bit after his creation. Now, for those of you who don't know, as I mentioned earlier on in the stream, Morghur is not the oldest character. He was first brought in 6th edition Warhammer. And in 6th edition Warhammer, in the Beasts of Chaos army list, was it just Beastmen back then? No, it was Beasts of Chaos in 6th edition. Beasts of Chaos army list. We got introduced to that character. So, given where I was at the time, I just resigned from Games Workshop for the second time. I was in an in-betweeny period where I was considering going to university. Indeed, I'd just gone back to university just before I decided to have kids instead. And just before I decided to go back and work for Games Workshop again as freelance. We were in the in-betweeny period, and I was avoiding Games Workshop for a good year because I'd resigned, I'd moved on, I was doing other things. So I didn't pick up the army list until around about 2005, a little bit of time after its release point. And I remember leafing through it for the first time and landing on Morghur's artwork. That's actually the thing that got me going first in the 6th edition. And it was funky as all. It was awesome. Big, long, heavy drapes around his horns, which are curling up. And then this big stack, almost like a basket on the back of his head, full of skulls. With an enormous claw hanging out of one side and this huge staff grasped indeed inside his beclawed hand. And I was like, okay, yeah, nice art. You done well. You've hooked me. Do tell me about Morghur. I won't go into great depth here because I'd rather leave that for Sotek to pick apart all the bits that he particularly loves. But to put it simply, I started off going, oh, it's a character who's about 3 centuries old. That sounds fun. We get a lovely story of the birth of this beast man to a human mother, and it's horrible. I won't go into the details here because I'm sure that the loving recreation of the terrible birth that will make many an alien movie wince in disgust. It's so horrible. Morghur is born and he is one hell of a beastman. He is a beastman that no matter where he goes, the, let's say, corruption of chaos follows. Mutants spawn all around him and literal spawn bubble up out of those who are around, and the earth blackens wherever he stands, and basically it's bad stuff. And I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. we've got ourselves somewhat of a beastman equivalent to, say, A-Cold Hellbrass. Wherever A-Cold Hellbrass went, a Chaos Champion of Tzeentch, instead of death and destruction, in many respects, it was life and change that popped up. And I was like, oh, there's a nice little mirroring going on there. I kind of like this. And then I kept on reading. And the story changed a little bit because they establish a story and you're like, okay, cool. That's a pretty cool story. And then they go, you know that story I've just told you? Excuse me while I take an axe and completely hack it down and say it's significantly bigger. Because Morghur, as far as the Beastmen were concerned, wasn't just the Beastmen who had been spreading corruption for the last 3 centuries through the old world. No. He was, as far as the Beastman was concerned, a reincarnation of an ancient Beastman spirit, thing, creature, entity. You can choose your particular poison. But what, as far as they were concerned, Morghur was this creature that could not be killed and would come back. He was this great epicenter of what it was to be a beastman, almost a prophet in some regards, because the beastman himself was plagued with visions of destruction and ruination, of the great civilizations of the old world coming crashing down, and he literally couldn't escape them. He was almost mental, crazed out of his head, and beastmen from all round would come flocking to his side, and they, much like the surrounding people about him, would often mutate, but sometimes to greatness. This great spirit, as far as the beastmen were concerned, had been reincarnating or coming back since possibly the Cataclysm or beyond, which is interesting given that the beastmen themselves were said to have come from the Cataclysm. So we have an entity that perhaps predates beastmen and is somehow directly connected to and related with beastmen. And I was like, okay, fair enough. So we've got the physical body of this entity, which has been kicking around for the last 3 centuries. But beyond that, all manner of other cool stories. Okay, that's pretty cool. I like it. Then I read his rules. I'm not going to go in depth here. I'm merely going to give you my response to them, because this is Sotek's excitement to worry over, because his rules. You ready for my summary? Holy frick sticks! What the hell? Bloody hell! Also, what? Holy shit! Oh crap! His basic stats weren't that good, as I recall. He only like 4 wounds, and his strength was only 4, toughness 4, and similar. So for those of you who know your Warhammers, it's like, yeah, he's all right. But what he could do to your Beastman army was extraordinary. It completely changed the entirety of the Warherd and how it manifests. And without going into any detail, there's going to be mutation all over the place, literal chaos spawn rising up, and even the woods themselves causing fear and swallowing up, because wherever he goes, taint follows, and that includes everything living around him. He is truly horrendous and turns the entirety of the beastman horde he's with into a braying mob. Now, if you know your Warhammer rules, you know one of the core basics of Warhammer is you have a general who spreads his leadership around him, and they go to war, and your general's the best leadership, and he'll hopefully stop you. But no generals when you include him, because it's just one gigantic mob. Let's go! And I was like, cool. Nice. It added some variety to the standard composition of a Warhammer game. Warhammer games were, and still to a degree are, relatively staid, fixed, over complex affairs. And they often, with the idea of potential tournament player, keeping everything balanced, tend to all just be copy-paste facsimiles of each other with slightly different shades and colours added to each one of their special rules running through. But when it actually comes to it, there's not an enormous amount of difference between, say, an elf or a beastman or a human. It's often just one little tiny number, and that's about it, with maybe a special rule or two that don't add much colour. This changed the entirety of the army, and that's super cool. That's super fun, because it added variety and spice to the game and showed that Warhammer didn't just need to be the same game every single time. And I loved him. It was one of those rare moments where something was added to Warhammer relatively late in the day, because we are now talking 30 years into its existence, which was actually new, actually interesting, and also game-changing in terms of how it actually manifested on the battlefield. Loved it. So when I was working Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2, I very nearly, when we were working on the Realms of Chaos, strongly suggested that we did more with this. But we ended up not doing that because that book was already massively overwritten. There was so much inside the Tome of Corruption at that point that adding another 2, 3, 4, 5 pages, which may sound like it's not very much, was just impossible.
That book is massive.
It's stacked. Properly stacked, and I wasn't in a position where we could really add more for all I would have loved to do so. So that meant we never really got any writing on about it. And as Warhammer went through its editions into 7th, and we got our next version, as Sotek said near the beginning of the stream, the next one was pretty bland by comparison. It was just the Beastman character, kind of stripped of all of its craziness and just brought back into balance. And I will be blunt, kind of didn't like it. Now, it's not that I didn't like it. It's not like it was bad. In terms of game balance, I understand what they were doing. But when you compare that to, say, for example, what happened inside the Wood Elf Army List in 8th edition, where they take that character, the Wood Elf Army List for me in 8th edition is a super important one because it's the first one my eldest daughter collected an army for. And we spent ages poring over that army. This would have been around about, I don't know, whenever it was released, actually. She would have been about 7, 8, I think, when she did her first Wood Elves. Good times. And we poured over all the details in there. And Morghur, throughout the course of that book, isn't just used. He's basically the core antagonist for the Wood Elves. And he is presented as the core antagonist because of one of the core things that drives him. And that's that the Chaos Gods are driving him to, as far as we can tell here, hunt down, in particular, the Elven Gods. In particular, is a lovely little, it's almost a throwaway sentence sitting in the middle. It's going to be around about page 20, 21, 22, 23, somewhere around there. So it's near the beginning of the book, because I remember going over it with my daughter. And there's this lovely little bit that set my mind going on fire, because it made a couple of points clear. Number one, that Orion and Ariel weren't really aware of the fact that there was others like them. That was interesting. Now, you might go, who are Orion and Ariel, if you're not Wood Elf fans? Cut this story down really quickly. They're the king and queen of the Wood Elves, and they are the mortal or immortal manifestations of 2 of the elven gods. They are avatars of those gods, although exactly how they manifest as avatars, as theophanies, if you will, is much debated. But as far as they were concerned, they were the only ones. And in this little cast-off line, Morghur makes it quite clear that they're not. And that Morghur is being driven by the Chaos Gods to hunt down these gods and eat them, to remove them from the world. Because back in the War of Heaven, back at the beginning, the Chaos Gods had done that to countless elven gods, and they had eaten their way through most of the pantheon, and there was very few of them left alive. And Morghur was hunting those few who had fled through into the mortal realms and were still there. And that was cool as fuck. I'm going to be blunt. I read that little bit and I went, well, this is awesome. Not only do we have reference to the war in heavens with the Chaos Gods versus the Elven Gods back in the day, but they are continuing that battle in the mortal realm. So any who are manifesting as Elven Gods in the mortal realms are being hunted down by Morghur. He is driven to do that, to bring about the final ruination of the world. And at a moment in time that he is plagued by. Basically, Ranadandra, as the elves put it, the end of times, is hard-coded into what Morghur is. And I loved that. I remember reading it going, oh, hell yes, this is a great character. And then when you see what it does to the Wood Elf realms, I'm not going to go into details. We're going to leave this over for Sotek. I'm being very kind today. But when you see everything that he does to the Wood Elf realms, and what an enormous impact that he has upon the Azrai. It's not small, it's big. It's not just a small character now. And in some respects, before, definitely with 7th, this character was kind of downscaled, but when you see what it does, not downscaled at all. Regardless of what 7th edition did, Morghur was important. Morghur was very important because Morghur was in some respects you could almost call him the herald of the end times, because he was hunting down the elven souls that had escaped the Chaos Gods, these elven gods, and And if he got them, then the end times could come. And that's one of, I feel, the great untold stories of the end times, because that should have almost been the heralding point of the end times. And we've discussed my disappointment with the end times and Sotek's disappointment with the end times multiple times in previous streams. But I'll just sum this up with, in my world, it probably should have been the absolute consummation, not consummation, that's a slightly different one, consumption. Let's get the right one here. We don't want beastmen attacking our elves that way. The consumption of Ariel might have been the starting point of Ranadandra's arrival, because that would have changed everything and would have also given the story of Morghur much more impact, because it clearly had been, since the beginning of the Cataclysm, munching down on elven gods in one fashion or another. And it was a great character and a great story that I feel was not necessarily laid down. That brings us up to where we are today, where we have the character over in Total War doing his Total War things, which I don't know a great deal about, and I'm quite happy just deferring to Sotek in this one. And we have a character that, miniature-wise, not necessarily that great, but the lore and the extended background when we move through the novels and the pickups everywhere else is, in fact, fascinating, deep, wide, and massively impactful, and also one that if we'd had an 8th edition of the Beastmen army list, I think would almost certainly have been developed significantly. Whether that was tying it more strongly to the elven gods or broadening that out, whether it was a writer that was aware of that type of background or alternatively not, we just will never know. We were just never really given the proper update for the Beasts of Chaos. And as we all know, particularly if we look over on the Age of Sigmar side, the Beasts of Chaos are not necessarily the most, let's say, well-purchased army. Meaning that Beastmen often get sort of relegated and pushed to the side, not as much as the Bretonnians, but relatively significantly, meaning that the character that we have today was last written about in Warhammer with stats with 7th edition. As I'm sure Sotek's going to mention, it's not great. But the character that we have in the fiction is great. In fact, I would argue is one of the most interesting characters in Warhammer, which is one of the reasons why I'm so looking forward to occasionally chipping in as Sotek goes to town on his big beastman ass. There you go. That's my relatively brief intro.
Yeah, okay. So there's a lot of really, really cool stuff to get into with Morghur here. Before we do that, though, I'm going to cut up on Super Chats real quick just so those don't get away from me.
Yep.
So, Mads Christensen, in one short story I read, Kurt Helborg duels a Grail Knight to the death to end a border skirmish. Helborg ends up losing the battle, but cheats with a cannon assault, which kills the Grail Knight. Would there have been a diplomatic fallout from this dishonorable tactic?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, and the lack of follow-up and that sort of thing is one of the things that bugs me most.
Yeah, that would have.
I say bugs me. No, actually, it doesn't bug me. Interests me, because if you're writing, say, the roleplay game, you've got an entire thing that you can then develop into something new and can make for some really interesting plots.
Let's see. Bioflet, happy birthday, Loremaster. Thank you. Many happy days to you and yours. Without putting the locus of corruption he is, could Morghur have become Everchosen? That's an interesting question. I don't think so, because of what we'll discuss about his kind of what he is, what his nature is. But I do think if the end times have been wrought properly, there should have been a moment where Archaon had to have dealt with or encountered Morghur.
Yeah, I broadly agree with that completely. The Everchosens appear to be, as much as it disappoints me to say so, human. And they appear to focus that way from Games Workshop side. It's not what I would do, but it is absolutely what Games Workshop has done. So that immediately, to a degree, discounts them. Having said that, though, if you look at the Everchosen lore, it's entirely open, but Morghur would not be pursuing it. It's not what Morghur does. To become Everchosen, you have to do a whole ton of crap. There's all manner of steps, and he's not going to be doing that because Morghur is on a mission. He's on a mission from the gods, and he is not going to be backing down from that just because there's some potential Everchosen nonsense that could be pursued. He's not a character that is filled with ambition and the need for more power. He is doing something completely different. He is, in some respects, almost mindless, but not. So there's a lot to discuss there, but I think the answer to this one is a very clear no.
Yeah, the way I would put it is, if we ever got confirmation that there were non-human Everchosen, which I really hope we do. I would say if there had ever been a Beastman Everchosen, which I hope there would be at some point, getting Morghur on side or encountering and surviving Morghur, I feel would have been a necessary step to be a Beastman Everchosen.
I think that works quite well. I also think that if you're wanting to define the story of Morghur in a host of different ways for your own games, there's lots of things you can do, because at some point in the long distant past, that spirit was set off. He could, for example, be the spirit of the very first Everchosen from the Cataclysm, if you wish to do that sort of thing. He could be a remake of Morghur, pardon me, rebuilt and then reincarnating, chasing down the things that killed him, because Morghur, if we go with the first old and very much retconned and re-retconned and then changed around story, was killed by an elven god. So we have a very strong tie there, because he was killed ultimately by an Aryan who was possessed by one of the elven gods. And he was very much in a similar strand to what Ariel and Orion are as well. So we have a strong need for revenge and retribution, and then plagued by the visions of his own failures and the devastation that's to come from another Everchosen, it would completely make sense to make him a reincarnating form of the very first Everchosen, if you wish to do so. There's lots of stories that you can make for justifying who he is, what he is, and where he comes from. Their lore is more than vague enough that whatever you make up, even if it contradicts a minor detail here or a minor detail there, you can very easily override that with, yeah, but people get shit wrong. And that's fine. So, yeah, you could make that the case, but I would suggest that he himself as Everchosen is not a good idea, unless you make it part of his historic story.
Yeah, I agree. Kobo, you know the Simpsons gag of Moe tossing Barney out of the bar only for Barney to immediately appear behind him? That's basically the relationship Morghur has with the Wood Elves in a nutshell. Yeah, that's very true. that is so accurate. Yeah.
Morghur came back the very next day.
Complete Mass 819 just got done watching the Boss Money End Times videos. Was sad to hear we could have gotten Arnold Schwarzenegger versus Archive the End Time if written better / different. Also, do we know which Old One created Krokgar's arm? No. We just know that it's Old One technology. It appears to be like a really powerful piece because it like does some really crazy bullshit, but we don't know who made it or where exactly it came from precisely.
I also think it's worth noting that the Mazda Mundi stream, which if you haven't watched, it was one of our Wednesday streams and it was bloody brilliant. Where we discussed a big what if, and what ifs appear, I think, are going to be super fun. But the Mazda Mundi one had Mazda Mundi versus Archeon because it was the Mazda Mundi stream. If we were actually writing an end time stream, you might find that that's not the story we'd come even close to doing. After all, when you're attempting to summarize everything that is Warhammer into a core conflict at the end, Mazda Mundi, as much as we may love him, is not the core figure of Warhammer. He is a core figure of the entire setting. He's
more over there.
yeah, totally. But he is really more over there. So if you're wanting to create the epic battle that summarizes everything that Warhammer has been since first edition through to 8th, you probably wouldn't go with Mazda Mundi. You'd probably have Mazda Mundi actually leading all of the Slann away, leading them off towards Age of Sigmar or some equivalent. So that isn't probably the end we'd go for. Nevertheless, I think it made for an absolutely marvelous end for that stream, and I really enjoyed it.
Yep. Thank you for the raid, by the way, Nerd Rage friend. Appreciate the happy birthdays. Thank you very much. Charles CK, happy birthday, Sotek. So glad I found you all those years ago through the Q&As. I need to get back to those. And subscribe to you because of that video calling out for being bad and ignorant. Well, you're welcome for that. It wasn't hard to do. The blood and space cultivated here. Well, thank you. Yeah, just a reminder that, especially with all things going on in the world these days, we welcome everyone as long as you're not, an intolerant piece of shit. We are more than happy to embrace you in our community and help you find a place in the Warhammer Fantasy world, because there's enough space for everyone as long as they're not an intolerant piece of shit. And we're happy to find and tell interesting stories. That is probably the thing I love doing the most with Andy, is exploring a lot of the things that would exist in the Warhammer world. It's just that the writers that we had for most of the last 40 years just didn't think about that kind of stuff. And it's nice to fill in those gaps.
I want to bring up one comment just to make sure it's not missed, because it'll get lost in the long stream. One from Rockaboy Jukebox. If Morghur is hunting down the elven gods in the material realm and Ladriel walks the earth as the Lady of the Lake. Yeah, so I just want to bring that one up just so that we are clear. I think there is a very very strong tie there, and it makes sense for why Morghur, when he was most recently reincarnated, woke up in Bretonnia.
Yeah.
And right beside both the Bretonians and the Wood Elves. And I think that that's a story that should have been told.
I will have a thing that's going to make you go, what? In regards to that, because what if I told you Morghur did go after Ladriel? We'll talk about that in a little bit. Maybe Andy and Sotek can play Warhammer 3 campaign together. Chat about lore and section just wrong for lore. It's going to be.
We keep on meaning to.
Yeah, we will get around to that again soon at some point this year. We will resume that at some point this year.
We certainly will.
Daniel Derby, greetings from the land down under. Morghur won me my first overwhelming victory in Total War Warhammer 3. Loved him ever since. Does he ever transform under the Chaos Spawn? All the time. That is his go-to gimmick. Well, okay. So just a quick insight into his original rule set with how fucking bullshit he was. Morghur would wander around the battlefield by himself, and it would say, okay, every shooting phase, you pick the nearest target, friend or foe. Doesn't matter if they're friends or enemies. You pick the nearest unit and you roll a d6, and they take that many strength 4 hits with no armor allowed. And if it causes any damage, it doesn't even have to kill them. The most terrifying thing is it doesn't even have to kill a model. It's just if it does damage, however much damage he did, he immediately creates a Chaos Spawn right next to him with that many wounds. So he could walk up to an enemy and just be like, you're a Chaos Spawn. Walk up to a friend, you're a Chaos Spawn. Like, he did that. Like,
what I particularly liked about that rule was that it was different to how these rules are normally expressed in almost every other instance, where it's normally target a model. If that model dies or some equivalent, it's turned into spawn. You replace that model and put spawn in instead. It was much simpler. It was roll some damage. If any damage is taken, you take a spawn model and slap it onto the battlefield. Away you go. It's not necessarily the model you were targeting. It's not necessarily that one. It's just you get spawn now. And that was really good because it meant that if you had characters who had multiple wounds, those spawns still popped up. Or better, if you had a special character you'd spent frickin' loads of points on, the idea that if a single wound was caused in that and just turned into spawn would have been so power gamey and awful that it made the character a center of complaints. But instead, they built a really nice rule where a spawn could just appear beside it and then immediately start laying into it. Good times. So yeah, great rule, and also terrifying in terms of what it means for the lore, because they are literally spawning around him at all times.
Also, my favorite rule of his that was genuinely terrifying if I had been playing with or against him is if any wizard, friend or foe, mispass and rolls a double, they just instantly die and turn into a Chaos Spawn.
Spawn!
It is fucking terrifying. So but the thing about Morghur that makes him super great is his rules were scary, but he hit friends and foes equally. It's just that the Beastman got to keep control of whoever turned into a spawn. But you could have a funny instance where your great Brave Shaman accidentally gets caught by Morghur and blows up into a Chaos Spawn, which is very funny. Beastmen leave love in 40k. Sure. I don't have much of an opinion there. Sir
I used to have several Beastman regiments in my old Imperial Guard army back in the day.
They have a very cool Necromunda team now. Or no, is it Necromunda? It's the other game. Kill team. They have a very cool looking kill team now. Sir Panza, wherever he goes, taints follows. That's what she said. Oh my god. He got that weave in his younger days. Frank's kid. Maybe a Famir / Dragon Ogre ever chosen where they were at the peak before humanity. Yeah, that could be super fun. Yeah, that would not be hard to do.
You say that, but I think if Games Workshop has their hand, regardless of how old they decide the Everchosens are, the world that they've created now, there is really no worry about before humanity, because there's not really a before humanity. Humanity were upraised by the old ones, meaning that we can have now, in a way that wasn't the case in 6th edition Warhammer, where humanity wasn't upraised by the old ones. They pretty much evolved into their current estate in the magic-filled world that changed things. But humanity's absolutely upraised now by the old ones. That means that Morghur, as he was back in the 3rd edition, the fourth edition of Warhammer, where Morghur was the first ever chosen and was human, can come back in that state. He was written out because there was considered to be no real humans kicking around who could fulfill that role. In the first Cataclysm, it was all demons that came up, demons that flooded the world, and demon gods that did all the slaying. And the old lore from the fourth edition was replaced. Wherever it said mortals, they just went script, demons. And then after sixth edition into seventh and then eighth, they were like, well, maybe it's not. And then the old world, it definitely isn't. So that very much could be the case, but I think it's very likely that if Warhammer is going the direction it always did previously, chaos is at its heart led by humanity.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Ricky Chapman, Morghur is such a big threat, but how many people are actually aware of him? 30 poses? Not a lot. Morghur is a very, so one of the things I like about him, and we'll get into this more just as soon as we get to these last couple, is that Morghur is very quickly revealed to be an ancient threat. But the only time someone becomes genuinely keenly aware of him to the point where they start tracking him is when Ariel becomes Ariel. So like right after the Winter of Woe, when Ariel and Orion go from being two regular elves to being the avatars of gods, Ariel, now that she's interconnected with the Weave, becomes aware of him. So you could argue that the elders of the forest, the forest spirits, have been aware of Morghur for a very long time. Mm-hmm. But we don't get their perspective until the Azrai become the Azrai.
Yeah, agreed. Now, as an entity, he is legendary, and by that we mean that he has popped up in the various stories and histories of most species of the old world. And it does appear to be, at least from the perspective of the lore we have at the moment, old world focused. Whether that's because he's just chasing down elven gods and thus he's been sticking around where the old world was and possibly attempting to spear his way over to the other side, who can say? The dwarves have got an old name for him which escapes me. It's like Gordon or Gor. I just remember it being Gordon. I only remember it's Gordon because that's how I remembered it. Gordon, sure. Cyan Thair for the elves, which as far as I recall was just the name that was given to him by Ariel anyway, rather than necessarily being an older one. So Cyan Thair meaning corruptor, and the Empire is a name for him as well, which I forget. So, but cut a long story short, he pops up here and there all over the place. So Bretonnians probably have their own name for this ancient entity that caused corruption and mutation wherever it went also. But in terms of it being an actual thing that people are chasing down and are aware of, not many at all.
Yeah, and one of the things, a notable part of what makes him who he is makes him very difficult to track, which we'll talk about that.
Shadowgave is the Empire. Shadowgave is the Empire. Yeah.
The Beastmen know him as the Master of Skulls. They don't call him the Shadowgave. The Empire calls him that. Sean Schultz, would it be a dark deed to shave the beard off? Yes, please don't. Please no shave beards, but do buy dark deeds.
I mean, it's not really a Sotek birthday thing. I'm just simply going to say, go buy it for yourselves and think of it as a gift to Sotek.
Drift Critic, do you think the Beastmen see themselves in Morghur? Yes, 100%. Given the cycles of violence that is such a theme of Beastmen and Morghur literally resurrects. There is a very strong religious relationship between the Beastmen and Morghur.
There is.
Which we'll talk about very shortly.
Thanks,
Simon, happy birthday. Thank you very much. Hope the Corruptor blesses you mutations of good health and sharp mind. If only that's how it worked, but yes, I that would be nice if I could cherry pick those. Andy, you have your headphones on backwards, says Holy Artist.
On purpose, because I don't want the stupid little this bastard poking around in my face because I'm not using that mic. It's rubbish. So I put it on back to front because it amuses me. Plus, it also actually captures my nice paper crown, just a little bit
there
better.
You go. Jemio, happy birthday, Sotek. I like to make grand alliances until the war. The Beastmen interact much with other Chaos factions. Some demons. I heard the one war herd in the Chaos War. Yeah, they interact. Beastmen are like they're chaotic little c. So sometimes they join up with other Chaos forces. Sometimes they attack them. It just depends on like the individual war leader. But there have been plenty of demons that have worked with Beastmen. There have been plenty of mortals that have worked with Beastmen. There's a whole cult in the Empire that if you play Wolfrup shows up quite a bit, especially in the Enemy Within, who have a whole thing with Beastmen. Though I would heavily recommend watching Lawhammer and reading the expanded materials so you can have more for them to do because they kind of fall off weirdly in the original Enemy Within storyline.
Yeah,
But Beastmen work together. They work with more factions than you would expect. There's even suggestions of them working with like greenskins and other types of races.
Yeah, originally the Beastmen were a part of the Chaos Army. They just were a part of the bigger whole. If you go back to Warhammer in its early editions, where they were looking at, say, 3rd edition or 4th edition, the Beastmen didn't have their own setup at all. The Beastmen were a part of the other armies. It wasn't until we hit 6th edition that they were separated out properly. It was 6th edition. 6th edition Beast of Chaos, yes it was. 6th edition where they were separated out. In 5th edition they got their own army list as part of just Chaos. So the answer to that is not just yes, it's an emphatic yes. Whenever the great swellings of chaos arrive and we have ourselves an ever-chosen rallying everyone together, the Beastmen are a core part of the attacks that come as they rise up from the forest, often at the bidding of the dark gods, to wipe out the civilization that is so hated all around them.
Yeah, and then last one before I get to finally dive in. Source Blood, happy birthday, Sotek, with the introduction of Kralma, not Karlma, but Kralma. Can we assume that there's always a Bray Shaman who goes looking for the reincarnation of Morghur? I would say it's not always, because we have some explicit notes about there have been times Morghur has been born and there's no one around him, and he sort of wanders for a while. But in the sense of Kralma, there is, and it's probably because it's building up to end times type shenanigans. There is a prophet character introduced for the old world who I love, and we'll talk about towards the end, who is a prophet blessed by Morghur himself and seems gifted to sensing Morghur. Because and one of the things we'll talk about is about Morghur. Just stay tuned. I'll leave it at that. It's complex. But Jeremiah, happy birthday, Sotek. Mastering follow-up questions. So no human culture is equivalent to native Meso/South American sides. Amazons really sucks. So as far as we've had detailed out, unfortunately, that is correct. That being said, that could change at the drop of a hat.
God damn, I hope it does. One of the things that upsets me about Warhammer is when they take other people's cultures and say, they're monsters, without providing any additional context, and often without any real sensitivity at all with what they're doing. In many respects, othering other entire civilizations to an extent that they are just things to kill. And that's sort of the case over here. It would be lovely if we had just more. And I was hoping the Lustria book would do that in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition, because it was an open goal just waiting to have a ball just pushed towards. I mean, just slightly. There was multiple opportunities that weren't taken there. So as it stands, sadly this is correct.
What I will say is that you don't have to go back very far. I think just like 5th edition to when there were lots of regular humans, in addition to Amazons, in addition to Pygmies, in addition to the Lizardmen. Now, the Pygmies, for good reason, got pretty much wiped off the face of the earth.
They're bad.
They were just horrible, horribly implemented. And unfortunately, I think there are some individuals that have written for GW, or maybe GW itself, that get a little spooked by putting humans over there, because they're like, well, we just don't want to touch it. We have the Lizardmen, so we'll just stick with that. But it leads to leaving an entire continent that feels empty, which sucks. And it also does the problem that your comment and Andy talked about as well.
Yeah, and I think so that you can really get how weird it is where it's currently left. If we think of the old world is much smaller than Lustria in total. If we just think of that area ranging from the border princes up to, say, Norska. Think of how many different species there are there. And we're not just talking elves, dwarves, humans, halflings. We're talking about beastmen. We're talking about greenskins. We're talking about... In fact, we could go on forever. There's far too much here we could discuss, because there is frickin' tons of them. They're butting up against each other. There's all manner of different stuff. Compare that to Lustria, where it's just this big open expanse of nothingness with the occasional Lizardman city, some Skaven undermining them, and, you know, some monsters, maybe some Amazons on the coast and some vampires, and what the hell else is out there? It's huge. It needs depth. It needs extra detail. And that's normally where the roleplay game steps in and goes, you know that big, huge area? Well, actually, it's full. It's teeming with life. It's teeming with both ancient civilizations, perhaps, that have collapsed, and newer tribes in a variety of different ways. But we kind of don't have that. We don't really have the dwarfs who've popped over there, as we are fully aware of from, say, Total War side. There's just this big, huge, empty expanse that needs to be filled.
Yeah, the Lustria book for 4th edition really dropped the ball, especially when it came to the they didn't have to go super hard on it, but just some mention in Skeggy of like, oh, native humans that have been here for generations, and some of them have come and integrated into Skeggy, then they come with trade, but they're very mysterious and they're way out west, would have been fine. Because like if you read the Lustria book, Western Lustria, like the entire western coastline behind the spine of Sotek Mountains, we have no idea what's over there. We have totally no fucking idea what's over there. And that would be a great place for humans to live. So, okay, I'm going to put
other things. I love the, just little comments saying weird things in Demdar Mountains, the cities of gold, what lies out there that can't be touched, the thing that drives humans to want to explore and dive deep into the jungles. That's more than just the lizardman cities that are there. Extra stuff. We are perennially interested in that sort of crap when we're role-playing the game, as in loads of cool things that our players could be chasing, and there is a complete lack of that sort of detail. And it's not just from the Lustria book. The Lustria book was the one that I hoped would fill that particular hole. It's pretty much from all of the books that have come from Games Workshop since around about 1995. It's just this big hole where they made a stab into the area and then went, you know what? We're just not going to discuss most of it, and we'll just focus on the lizardmen and whatever affects them directly.
All right, so I'm going to put a pin in Super Chest for just a little bit so I can talk about Morghur for a bit, and then we'll come back.
Time to go.
So, Morghur the Shadowgave. Like Andy said, really interesting history. One of the things that I actually really like about his character is there was some good coordination in the 6th edition army books where Morghur shows up for the first time in 6th edition, but he features in the history section of the Wood Elf book and the Beastman book. Like, he is treated as a very big, overwhelming threat. So one of the things that's really interesting is that you actually, at the time, and this happens when you continue later in the editions, because fun fact, as we've talked about, the Wood Elves did not get a 7th edition book, and the Beastmen did not get an 8th edition book. So Morghur's story gets carried through the editions, but by different factions and armies, which is very strange, but it just ended up being the way it was. So what the big things about him that are fascinating is that if you picked up the original 6th edition Beasts of Chaos book and you flipped a Morghur section, the first thing it tells you is that, oh, Morghur was born 300 years ago, and he's been alive for 300 years. He's very, very ancient. He's this big, scary guy, and you go, oh, okay, interesting. But then if you went and picked up the 6th edition Wood Elf book, it says, Morghur is an impossibly ancient spirit, a horror beyond imagining that's been around since time immemorial. And you go, whoa! Of that, there's this different levels of the storytelling. So one of the things about Morghur that's fascinating to me is that the big thing that I'm going to start with is, what is he? And the truth is that Morghur is a really fucking awesome. He's kind of one of the closest things we have to a very chthonic, Cthulian type entity, in that basically the fine details we get if you combine all of the editions lore about him and all the stories is that Morghur is an entity somewhere within the ether. He is this horrible spirit thing within the realm of chaos that is not directly connected to any of the major powers. He is his own entity. He's always very deliberately had the mark of chaos undivided. So you could argue that he is a minor chaos god, that he's some kind of alternate force. But the thing that it does say is that Morghur is believed to have come into existence either with the Beastmen or just before the Beastmen. And that he is a entity of change, but not Tzeentch's form of change. Because there's a very unique difference between the two of them. And I'm curious what Andy will think on this. I'm going to say it, but I'm curious of his thoughts, because this is something I've struggled with. Of, Morghur feels very Tzeentch coded, but he's not. He's very undivided coded. And it's because Morghur is presented as a godlike I'll use the term God, but keep in mind that it's not 100% whether he's a god or just a thing, but a god of mutation and a god of very physical change.
I'd like to chime in just so that we can reinforce parts here. The language here is encoded. In that the language that is used to describe Morghur is not the typical language that you would often find for, say, for example, a god. He is very much pitched more as a spirit, but this spirit is just another word for god. In the Warhammer world, spirits, etheric entities, chaos gods, normal gods are all basically entities from the aether, and Morghur is that. He is very clearly coded as that, but he's also coded as one that has been walking the material realm and returning to the material realm again and again. This is something that spirits don't normally do unless there is a breakdown between the material realm and physical reality. And now we have several examples of this. For example, the Wood Elves have all manner of spirits and spites and things that come along with their army, and that's because of Athaloran, where they live, where magic itself permeates everything, and the spirits of the trees themselves are alive and within the material realm, even though they are etheric entities. In truth, they can come through and live within the material realm. Morghur brings his own version of that, and as he does so, reality around him cracks as the physical rules of the mortal realm break, and he brings mutation wherever he goes. And not just mutations, chaos spawn are popping up everywhere. And I think what was suggested by Sotek there is almost certainly the case, and that is either it is an older entity from before the arrival of chaos that is corrupted by chaos and falls to its side. And if you want to get an example of that, go check our long discussions of Be'lakor in multiple streams, where loads of entities ended up being underneath Be'lakor at the top of the world, physical entities. It's possible that they were interacting back during the Cataclysm, for example, because Be'lakor was effectively a god at that point. And Morghur is not dissimilar. Or alternatively, it is one that didn't necessarily fall during that time, but during the Cataclysm itself becomes birthed, and in that respect is most likely an etheric entity that has been perverted and changed, and given all of its predilections, one that's probably very closely tied to the elves. Could have been one of the very first Treeman spirits, for example, of which there used to be loads. One of the very first. What we know for certain is, though, we have an entity that is almost the manifestation of... Now, the important part here, and I do agree completely with Sotek, is not change, it's mutation. It's literally being changed in the material realm, and we have immediate understanding for why that would be the case, because spirits can't normally manifest in the material realm without some sort of change around it, whether that's the change that's wrought by all the magic or whatever, and it pretty much surrounds itself with this and houses itself within a mortal shell. So it is a great entity, I would say near akin to a greater demon, a demon prince, or a god, that houses itself within a material form which very slowly mutates, but the world around it mutates heavily because of its presence. It is changing reality around it. It is enormously powerful. As to exactly what it comes from, we could argue this until the cows come home. The most obvious answer would be one of the other chaos gods, because there's loads of them. And we know that. And this is one that is closely associated, I agree, and coded with things that look like Tzeentch, but lie outside of that particular realm. It's very much a god that lies in the undivided. It's literally in the rules marked as undivided. So there's lots of ways we could argue around it, but all we really need to know is stupendously powerful demonic entity, spirit, whatever you want to call it, god, housed within a mortal shell that can be killed, but it will just be reborn in another beastman later, probably from a human.
Yeah, so that is actually the next interesting thing I want to talk about, is that, so Morghur, the actual true Morghur, is that thing in the ether. Yeah. It's this spirit god entity thing. What's revealed about Morghur is that the creature that you see in the material plane is usually a human And this is what I love about Morghur, because he's one of the genuinely most horrific fucking entities in the setting, and that his very first story he ever has about him is that there is a mother somewhere in Bretonia near the Forest of Arden who's pregnant with a baby, and the spirit of Morghur possesses the baby. And he literally takes over this unborn child, mutates, claws his way out of his own mother's womb, killing her and mutating her. His father attempts to strangle him, but starts mutating as he's touching him. Yeah. And by the time baby Morghur, an infant, he's literally, like, he doesn't grow up immediately. He stays a baby, an infant. By the time he crawls into the Forest of Arden, the village he leaves behind, everyone has mutated into horrible monstrosities. All of the animals are standing up on their hind legs, devouring each other, speaking in tongues, as someone comes across the village and just finds hell. And he's able to do that as a baby.
Yeah, I think this is a lovely little story. It's marked down by the Bretonians in one of their epic poems called Requiem, where they basically talk of the birth of Morghur. And the entire town mutates, and beastmen are born all around. And this story is our first insight into who Morghur is. Morghur is the bringer of change. And I'm not going to... No, I'm going to change that. Morghur is the bringer of beastmen.
Yeah.
And that, I think, speaks to who he is. We have a very, very clear story about Morghur's birth, and beastmen are the result. You could argue that Morghur is basically the beastman god. If ever you were going to create a fifth chaos power from the existing Warhammer lore, this is a very, very obvious choice. And doing something like elevating, say, the Horned Rat in Age of Sigmar is, I feel, a disservice to the lore they've already got for chaos. Morghur is possibly the foundation point of the Beastmen. The arrival of Morghur on the material plane changes the human he's born into to a beastman, and all of those around him either mutate into beastmen if they're human, or mutate into beastmen if they're beasts. It is pretty much the bringer of beastmen into the world, and that for me is fascinating, because we have a very clear origin point. Now, it's possible he could have been the first beastman. It's possible you could retell that story in other ways, but given he's almost certainly an etheric entity, he very much feels like the etheric entity that created the beastman in the first place.
The thing that I love about him is he almost feels like he's a moment captured in time, of like when the cataclysm first happened. We have some artwork from the, I think, the Hordes of Chaos book that shows the first birth of the Beastman. It's this horrible black and white art where everyone's mutating and like a spine's coming out someone's back, and it's like awful. And it's like, this is the creation of the Beastman. And Morghur is that moment captured forever. That's just what he is. He's literally just a walking representation of the cataclysm, just poisoning the world around him as he wanders around, which is gross. Now, the thing that I love so much about him is the original. I don't know if the original author did this on purpose, but I'll go ahead and give him the credit for it because it's so fucking brilliant. Morghur, I think, represents two principles that are really, really kick-ass about the ether gods and the material plane, which is that he shows two things. It
was Gav. Gav Thorpe wrote it, just so we know. Of course it was Gav, yeah.
So the big one is that Assyrian was right.
Yeah, Gav.
Gods cannot come to the mortal plane. And the reason they can't is because of what happens with Morghur. That him forcing himself into this, just a single body, like it's like this giant impossible entity trying to squeeze into this itty-bitty body. One of the things that Ariel's seen talking about in some of the Wood Elf books is she talks about that it's the tiniest tendril of this force forcing its way into the world through Morghur, and he completely fucks up everything around him constantly. The second thing I love about him is that Morghur is the best representation of in the setting of how the ether, the realm of chaos, does not have a sense of time. It doesn't exist. And because of that, Morghur is an etheric entity forcing himself into a physical body, and he has no idea what the fuck is going on most of the time. For him, being in reality is so confusing that he appears utterly mad, because to him, all times are simultaneous. It talks about how when Morghur's walking around, he sees the end times. He sees
Yep.
Ranadandra. He sees what he's going to make reality into. That's what he wants it to be, but it's juxtaposed. He has this really fucked up confusion with he's seeing the world as it is in real time, while also seeing it as it was, as it will be along all potential futures. And it quite literally drives the body that he's puppeting, in a sense, utterly fucking batshit mad. He's a raving, mad creature that is often talked about as, despite how there is an intelligence behind him, it really struggles to focus on what's going on, which is what makes the elf god avenue so fascinating. One of the things that's talked about with Morghur that I once again love is that when Morghur sees Ariel for the first time, it provides this terrifying insight that he snaps. His attention goes, I understand what that is. I recognize that. Like in a world where, it's kind of like, imagine if I picked you up and threw you into a void where your main senses don't work because there's other senses, but you don't have them. You don't have the sense of whatever is going on in this void. And then suddenly something shows up that you can see, you
shines
can
a torch
taste,
on you.
You can smell it, and you go, oh, I know what this is. I can interact with that. And that's what the elf gods are to him, because they're also etheric entities. They're also these gods that are not supposed to be there, but they are. And Morghur can see them. And he can track them across. Like the first time Ariel and Morghur interact, Ariel appears in a spirit form. She blasts him and all of his beast tribe. But one of the things I love about the little story is it says that Ariel travels for months through lands that no elf can walk through safely before she finally gets to Morghur, which seems to suggest that he's either somewhere really far in the north or he's in some like terrible grove. He's somewhere very far away. And he meets Ariel for literally a couple seconds. She blasts him with magic and then teleports back to Athaloran. And it didn't kill him. He survives it, because we'll talk about how bullshit Morghur is in a second. But he survives, and he walks physically all the way to where Ariel was. And it takes him, I want to say it takes him like 200 or it takes him a couple hundred years.
Yeah.
But he literally walks to Athaloran, because the millisecond he got a scent, just a sniff of Ariel, it was the only thing he could sense, and he just follows her.
God
just follows
killer.
Her all the way. Which in many ways is fascinating, of that the gods are like so difficult for mortals to understand, but for Morghur, they're the only thing he understands.
Yeah. And I think it's also worth noting that this is a character who is sometimes given sense, but the sense almost certainly coincides with the great swellings of chaos, when the realm of chaos is beginning to impinge more heavily on the material realm. That's during one of the great wars that arise with the Everchosen. And when that happens and magic's flooding the world, that's when the world will make most sense to him, because that's when the aether is so heavily inflicted upon the material realm, allowing him to be, if anything, much more dangerous, much more powerful, and worse, potentially more together. Allowing him to be, unlike, say, his 6th edition version, where he turns every single beastman into a raving lunatic, into his arguably more his 7th edition one, where he's a character that can be part of a force with a general. So we've got two different versions of him, and we can justify that by saying the other version of him is more representative of him when he's a bit more controlled. The other one is when it's utterly wild. And I think both of them can potentially speak to variations of the character. For all the 7th edition version is bullshit. Not a particularly well put together version of the character as far as I'm concerned. But yes, we have ourselves an entity that is, I think, without compare, the most like a god you can, in fact, the most like an elven incarnation of one of the gods that you can get in the material realm that isn't an elf incarnation of the material gods, and is the closest, I think, as well to, before Games Workshop writes in a slightly different direction, a clear chaos power. A clear chaos power that should have been the undivided, it's almost the great beast itself, made manifest.
So, Morghur,
we should probably head towards super chats before you lose track, because they're beginning to pile.
Okay, that's a good point.
Sorry to be a pain and interrupt.
No, you're all good.
We do love our Morghur here.
Yes, we do. Roderick, the Warp Effect faction, get some Lorebeards love.
Poor Beastman.
Happy birthday, lovely lads. Looking forward to catching this podcast for truly rad of you doing those uploads. So, hey, no problem. I'm glad I'm somehow keeping up with them.
I'd just like to say, Roderick, to add on this one, Morghur, I think, in many respects, speaks to the Worf effect, because we have ourselves a character who should have been, as far as the Warhammer's world is concerned, core. It's a core character. Yeah. This is an important one. This is an important one not just because of the effect that it has upon the elves, but because of whatever it represents to an entire faction, the Beastmen, to Chaos as a whole. The Chaos gods are sort of guiding it. It's so out of control. And it should have been something incredibly important come the end times. And if the Beastmen had been focused upon, if the writers of the end times had looked at everything that Warhammer had to offer, then Morghur would have been a core component of it. Because Morghur is a herald of the end times, is constantly seeing the end times and is present at it, doing stuff that Morghur should be doing, which is eating elven gods. They shouldn't have simply said, for example, in the end times, oh, all the elven gods are sort of dead except for this one, and this is the only god that really matters anymore, screw the rest of them, and also elf gods are weird, man, bye. They should have had Morghur eating his way through them, having the panic rise amongst the few remaining elven gods as he's going from god to god to god. True end times bullshit, rising as the fifth chaos power in a fashion that made the chaos gods jealous and terrified. It would have been a marvelous mixture of different ways that this particular faction could have been brought to its heart, and the constant pushing aside of the Beastmen, where the only thing that really matters is all the hordes from the north screw the Beastmen, could have been given some balance, but sadly, no.
Yep. Darius Rose, happy birthday, Sotek. Based on the episodes covered, which character do you have a newfound interest or respect for? Mine would be Durthu, going from Angry Tree to Jesus fucking Christ. This is sad and reminds me of my worst grade. That's genuinely tough. Probably to Henwin. As much as I already loved and adored him, the episode we did on him, I think, added some very, for me, genuinely fascinating new avenues and expanded what the character meant, which made me love him even more. Because I think in a similar fashion to you, he goes from Lizard Moses to instead being a genuine evolution, but also in a way kind of a corruption of the Lizardmen.
Of the entire
that is
Lizardmen, yeah.
Really, really, really good.
Yep, agreed.
I would probably say that. Morton Crescent, Beastmen have worked with Greenskins since the old Battle Masters board game.
Haha! I broke that out not that long ago. Oh man, what a game. But yes, true.
Jack Flanagan, thank you very much, though. That was very generous, Jack.
Oh, Jack, thanks so much.
Happy birthday,
to Jack. Happy birthday to you.
Thanks to you and Andy, I've started running my own campaign of The Enemy Within 4th edition. Woohoo! You guys are an inspiration. Question, is Morghur best described as a force of nature or a defined character? Definitely a force of nature.
Yeah.
He's way more force of nature than anything else.
He is, but it's also worth noting that he is a directed force of nature. Whenever you see Morghur being deployed, it is almost always hand in hand, not with just with the Beastmen that are attracted to him from thousands of miles around. I'm telling you, he's the god of Beastmen. It's not just that they're attracted from thousands of miles around and all the corruption that lies at the heart of who he is, but the Chaos Gods themselves are sort of nudging him, pushing him towards what they consider to be some of the greatest enemies they have, which is indeed the elven gods in the material plane. So there is definitely some pushing and shoving there, but at its heart, force of nature, hunting down what little it understands in the material realm.
Yeah, he has a purpose, but he's basically like, think of it almost like a blind wandering thing that has to move by touch, where he has to kind of feel his way around through like a giant maze. So like he can sense you, he can maybe see you through the walls, but he's got to work his way around everything to get to you, which in some ways makes him genuinely terrifying. Because I mean, you can imagine, we don't know which elf gods it might have been, but because they're actually mentioned of there being there used to be a lot more elf gods than we have now. Elenil had something like 100 kids, and he's only got like 12 now. But you can imagine these gods trying to run, trying to hide, using things that would allow them to easily disguise themselves or get away from mortals, and Morghur's just never loses sight of them. Like, he just keeps on their scent and just keeps coming. There's literally no getting away from him.
Yeah, and I think this is an aspect of the character that is not underplayed, because it's actually to a degree overplayed because they never really resolve it. But this is an aspect of the character that I think requires more detail somewhere. And that is that he is someone who focuses in on the gods, hunts them down, and eats them. And that is something that clearly happened during the Cataclysm. And I would suggest that during the Cataclysm, this god entity was one of the Chaos gods responsible for killing many of the Elven gods.
Jonathan Scott, my headcanon for how Morghur overcomes the Elven immunity to mutation. Elves were immune to mutation. Morghur, yeah, but your gut biome, is it? Interestingly, there's the elves have a fascinating dynamic with Morghur of that in a lot of ways their resistance to physical mutation is the reason why I would say they're the best suited to dealing with him. And they're such an antagonist for him of that a lot of the other groups struggle much more. Because like humans, there is humans taking on Morghur is like a fucking good fucking
shit show.
Good fucking luck.
Yeah.
He's got your number. He's got your number big time. Elves actually stand a good chance, but a lot of Morghur's natural defenses, which I'll talk about here in just a minute, make him a nightmare for elves. Like he forces them to get close.
And it's worth noting, elves aren't immune to mutation. Yeah, now you might immediately go, "Oh, what you mean, Dakala?" No, I don't mean that they grow tentacle nonsense or whatever else it might be. They're immune to physical mutation, but they still mutate in the mind. And there's multiple examples of this in the lore, where elves who are exposed to chaos withdraw and become dark, become introverted. The weird aspects of their character manifest in a variety of different ways. This even happens to Ariel. Ariel goes a bit weird, and part of that is the corruption that she's been exposed to. She mutates within the mind rather than necessarily with the body, and this is something that's very much the case for elves. And I hard codified this into 4th edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, much to the disgust of many fans of 1st and 2nd edition, where they were like, "What do you mean I can't have mutated elves? We've got the Kala. Why can't I do that?" It's because it has moved significantly from where it used to be. Elves are now immune to mutation, but they absolutely are not immune to corruption, and that corruption will manifest in other ways. So you don't need to just worry about the microbiome, although I will say that our gut microbiome also is what changes our mood. So maybe you've got it.
Yeah, maybe. And the thing to add that's fun about that is, if anything, that makes elf mutations a lot more dangerous because it's not obvious. It's hidden and it's a ticking time bomb. Whereas like a human, it's like, oh my god, he just sprouted a tentacle, we need to chop that off. With an elf, A, there's really no curing it in most cases, and B, it's hidden, which is very spooky. Charles, if Morghur eats a god, is there some true messiness at play? I.e., do they cease to ever have existed, or can they keep existing in the future because war? So an etheric entity devouring another etheric entity, that's gonna get weird.
Yeah. Plus, we've got to also remember that what Morghur is doing is really quite physical. We don't know exactly what happens here because sadly the lore just sort of says, yeah, that's a thing that's probably happened, but we're not going to touch it. But this is a physical thing, which means that quite likely the entity lying behind it in the aether is not untouched, but is not as heavily affected as it would have been if that god was physically in the material plane, which means a god like Ladriel, for example, is possibly enormously in trouble, like massively in trouble, where other gods who are just manifesting through avatars, as in there's an aspect of the god held within a mortal, much like Morghur itself, then in that instance I would say that the god would not be eaten, but very possibly could be trapped, could be affected, could be who knows within the aether. It would get messy and complicated, but it would not be destruction. It would be one of those many almost mythic tales of gods fighting gods and weird things resulting. And I think it would be quite different to what would have occurred way back during the War in Heavens, when the elven gods were in the material realm directly, and before they eventually left, when very few of them were left alive. So I'd say you're right, it would be messy, and time messiness would definitely apply, but I don't think, given what, say, Orion and Ariel are, we would necessarily have the messiness that you'd expect here.
Cinchmaster, happy birthday. Thank you very much. Capybara Beastman. I probably wouldn't say Beastman, but I'd probably say the very big Capybara. Probably.
Definitely.
probably sadly nastier than the ones in our world. Though it would be funny to imagine them being like dinosaur sized, but they're still the same level of chill. That would actually
war
be
with the Skaven.
Yeah, that would be
Giant
very funny.
capybara.
Curious Rose, for Bovigors, how rare are they? And if not, how come we don't see them leading Warhorse generally as champions? Also, our best Warrior, just Gork of the Chaos Warriors are just born big. So, there are a lot of different kinds of beastmen that are thrown around different books, like the Ymir in the the Norska section of the Tome of Corruption. You have Bovigors and stuff like that. Generally speaking, beastmen, realistically, and we've talked about this a lot in prior streams, beastmen are infinitely more complex than they will ever present on a tabletop because it's just not practical to show them as they would actually appear, because it's a lot of work. Artists and roleplay games can depict them as they actually would appear, which is that if you come across a group of beastmen, it's extremely unlikely two of them would look the same. And they would be a weird motley mix of different kinds of creatures, including reptiles and insects and spiders and all sorts of other horrible, gribbly things. They wouldn't just be a bunch of goat guys. So would Bovigors be particularly rare? I mean, they might be like, they might be slightly, but would you ever come across some leading warhordes? Sure. Would you come across some big champions? Sure. But the restrictions of the tabletop medium and the video game medium they only have so many assets they could dedicate. And so they try and keep things very simple and to the point.
Yeah, and as an extra little point here on the Bestigors and Chaos Warriors, the answer is broadly no, but specifically yes. In that Bestigors are born big. They're the big ones. And they're the ones born with the big horns. Yeah. But you've got to realize that they are also, as beastmen and creatures of chaos, on the receiving end of many gifts of chaos, which means that their horns can grow bigger through life. Not just because they happen to be a beastman that grows big horns, but because they have been blessed by the gods themselves, or possibly even blessed by Morghur, if that's how you wish to perceive such things. Meaning that a beastman that may have started off with relatively small horns could very well get very large horns. Plus, with the chaotic nature of chaos, small c, then big C, it's quite possible that some smaller beastmen, who are not particularly large, get born with big horns. That happens. You will probably find that they will die relatively quickly for not seeing through their birthright. So, yeah, it's a complicated answer, but some of the Bestigor are like Chaos Warriors in that they got bigger and tougher over time, but most of them were born big and tough from the outset.
Vault Boy, thank you so much. Been a big fan since Kimmler. Oh, well, thank you. That one was fun, especially with
to you.
The editor included the goofy, like, if you watch that video, Krell pops out at very random times throughout the video. There's actually a game you can play of how many times Krell shows up in the video. Mr. Grubbler, happy birthday. If we believe Beastmen exist before or outside of Chaos, Minotaurs, Tigermen, then who is Morghur, ancestor god of the Beastmen? So the big thing that I would lean into, that I kind of talked about earlier, I think of him best as an encapsulation of the Cataclysm. He is almost that moment preserved, a moment of mutation.
I'll reword that for you to answer that one directly. He's the Beastman's Horned Rat, because that's what the Horned Rat is. The Horned Rat is the creation, from the creating point of the Skaven being born. He is that encapsulated. And everything that was that traitorous, horrendous instance in time, that's the Horned Rat. And Morghur is the same but manifests differently. The Horned Rat is an entirely etheric entity. Morghur is an entity that almost seems to drive itself into the material realm, because maybe that's how it tries to get to its children. Who knows? But I would say if you want to take that route, it's not so much he's the ancestor god of the Beastmen. He's just the horned god. He is the great beast, but made manifest in a very different way.
Yeah. Also, until we get to see them, it would be difficult to say whether Tigermen are beastmen or whether they are bestial-like men, which are two very different things. Wolf, are you guys trying to say Jim Carrey is Morghur? I'm not saying it's not Jim Carrey. Jonathan Scott, sung to Trogdor music. I do not know Trogdor, sadly. I must say I'm aware of the term. But Morghur was a beastman. I mean, he was a god beastman, or maybe he was just a god, but he was still Morghur. Yeah, sorry, I don't know the tune, but I'll leave it to you to do the Google foo if you want to know what that tune is. Kyle Dooley, happy birthday!
Happy birthday!
Don't. I look forward to hearing you guys ramble and rave every weekend and curse Nurgle every time he interferes. Man, second to that.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Grumbler, Morghur is a really good Eldritch horror. What do you think about Warhammer as a horror world, and why is Peter Fehevari the best Warhammer horror writer? I do not know what he's written off the top of my head.
So, yes, Morghur's good Eldritch horror. I think Gav nailed it. What do I think of Warhammer as a horror world? Ever since pretty much the first ever Warhammer adventure was written, and not the first one, but almost the first one, when we're looking at, say, for example, Shadows over Bergenhafen, which was the second part of the Enemy Within campaign, it was literally pitched and requested as, from Brian Ansell, as a Call of Cthulhu adventure, but for fantasy, because Warhammer had yet to really nail down what it was. Tzeentch being used in that as a chthonic entity pretty much pitched what Tzeentch would be from that day forward. So what do I think of Warhammer as a horror world? It's what it was created as the second the Warhammer Fantasy roleplay game started playing with it. So it has been that since maybe about 3rd edition Warhammer and about 1st edition Warhammer Fantasy roleplay. It's what it was almost pitched as. So I think it's great.
Yep. And is Peter the best Warhammer fantasy or Warhammer horror writer? I would say no, because he's only written 40k books. Call me back when he's written a fantasy book. Jeremiah, tall beastmen are great, but I think beastmen defenders of Athel Loren against other beastmen would fit well. Team Tree, they don't seem inherently offensive to the Azrael. So there are a lot of beastmen in Athel Loren that are obviously very chaos coded. I think you would probably have there would probably be a discussion about what happened to the bestial creatures of Athel Loren during times of the Cataclysm, where you had the spirits having this confrontation with these these blooded creatures, these mammalian life forms or other type creatures. It seems that the forest spirits, for the most part, purged everything out of Athel Loren that didn't meet I'm going to put it this way. From what we know, there are things like Zotes, which you could argue are a type of beastmen that live in Athel Loren. So there are creatures that Athel Loren has had as a part of it before the coming of the Cataclysm. But Athel Loren was one of the few places that when the Cataclysm happened, it managed to purge the internal elements and then started pushing outwards. So there would probably not be any creatures that were created by chaos and then had time to settle down over the course of many millennia, because the forest spirits would have just literally massacred all of them when they first popped up.
Yeah.
Because Athel Loren can remember what things were like before the Cataclysm.
Yeah, I would take 2 different definitions here. Definition number 1 is creatures that were there already. Definition number 2 is, in our second set of entities, are the beastmen that rose during the Cataclysm. Now, the beastmen that rose during the Cataclysm are the humans that turned into beasts and the beasts that turned into men. And they were the first beastmen, and Morghur, in many respects, appears to be a horrendous entity that either caused this to happen, whether it was the Warpstone raining down, whether it was this entity, none of it really matters, because there's not really a before or after in the Aether. The birth of the Beastmen and Morghur are intrinsically linked. Of that, there is no doubt. Which means that the Beastmen as a whole are intrinsically linked to this entity and chaos. They are the children of chaos as they're marked inside the army list. Mm-hmm. And for all that we can, yes, have converts. For example, there are dwarfs who fall to chaos. There are elves who fall to chaos. There are humans who fall to chaos. Equally, there will be beastmen who fall to other gods as well. They are the equivalent of the chaos cultists of the beastmen. They, of course, would exist because it's a complicated world where things are never nice and simple in black and white terms. And they certainly aren't what the army lists present, where all beastmen are chaos. But in this particular answer, to defend it exactly, Tal beastmen are great. I agree. But I think beastmen defenders of Athel Loren against other beastmen fit well. I heavily disagree, because the elves would not allow it. Those beastmen wouldn't just be persecuted, they would be seen as the enemy. They will be attacked again and again and again and again and again. They will have no recourse but to find whatever solace they can with the beastmen who are doing it right, where at least they're standing up and having a chance against the other, the hellish elvish spirits and the elves that face off against them. The beastmen are the children of chaos, and they have a god, or gods, depending on how you want to look at it. And I don't think there would be any friendly beastmen that the spirits and the elves like. No, they just don't. They are beastmen. They deserve to die. And it will be as black and white as that. Look at the Azrai. They are horrendous entities. They don't have time for going, oh no, that beastman over there is okay. The spirits are like, what spirit would ever accept them?
They're the most xenophobic of all of the elves. Like,
so
they're nasty.
I love the idea, and I think that there could be a really good single example of potentially having it work. But I think the overall general reality is it wouldn't last long. They would be murdered.
Yeah.
Sad though.
Who has more bullshit, Morghur or the elves? We'll get to it in a second, but I actually think Morghur has more bullshit than the elves have, which is a hard sentence.
If you separate the elven gods from the elves, and I think that is a fair distinction, then Morghur by far.
I'd put it that way. Jack Berry, thank you very much for the bits. Love to see it. Thank you very much. What is the credits? Is there a relationship between Morghur's god side and the Cygor's weird side as well? Yes, they're close.
Kind
they're
of the same
similar.
thing.
Yeah, the Cygor are basically blind because they only see in etheric currents. Yeah, not terribly dissimilar.
Yeah, Morning, I think that's a good call.
Yeah. Hoplite, pretty sure Morghur's the one with literal bullshit. Ha ha ha. Rick Chapman, in a TTRPG, we were a Chaos Lord. To prove something, we found Morghur and approached him. We survived. We ended up with crab legs, 18 eyes, 6 little baby arms on our stomach around a maw with centipede teeth and bleed insects. Great time.
Ricky.
Great time. That sounds like about how it goes.
OMG, but yes, that is the unfortunate outcome of dealing with something like Morghur.
Bleed insects. Wow, that is aren't Bovigors essentially minotaurs? Interesting enough, no. Minotaurs are an actual stable species.
Mm-hmm.
There are notes throughout various books where you'll see mentions like beastmen and minotaurs and centaurs, where they are 3 separate groups that just work together. But the minotaurs are actually their own completely unique species, just like dragon ogres are their own completely unique species. There is a difference between beastmen and minotaurs. Mr. Bear, I've been listening to the first episodes. Lorebeards is by far my favorite podcast, and though I usually can't catch it live, I always listen to the VOD. Love you and Andy deep diving into Warhammer Fantasy. Well, thank you so much.
Hey, Bear, thanks.
Daniel, Andy, does Morghur have anything to do with Lord of the Great Beast listed in your Lawhammer Talents document?
Yes.
Ooh. Psych, do you think we'll get Morghur with the old world? Yes, they've already confirmed it because the new special character is literally the blind prophet of Morghur, and Morghur blessed him.
And I think that also speaks to what Morghur is, regardless of what they'd write him as. It definitely speaks to what he is in my world.
Yeah. Maglajot, do you think Morghur went after Myrmidia when she was in the mortal world? I would also think he goes after the Flame of Ulrich. I would say yes to both of those things.
On my side, I'd say possibly no. But possibly yes, depending on your, and this is why I'm adding a little bit of potentially shades of grey here. It depends on what you decide Morghur is. If Morghur is a god of beastmen, if Morghur is an entity that is effectively reborn into the world again and again because of this great pressure from the birthing of the beastmen and its desire to effectively just eat or otherwise bring down these elven gods, or just gods as a whole, then it's chasing Myrmidia. Of that, there's no doubt, because it is a god made manifest in a mortal form. In some respects, it's almost exactly what Morghur is. And it will be hunting it down, no doubt at all. The Flame of Ulrich, very different kettle of fish. It's not a god. The Flame of Ulrich was created by a god, but lots of things in the Warhammer world were created by a god. So I'd say no to that. But if your version of Morghur is this great demonic entity that lies in the beyond, that the Chaos gods are manipulating into hunting down what quite clearly they're hunting down, the elven gods, then no, it has no interest in Myrmidia at all. The Chaos gods are influencing it to take out the elven gods, which means that Orion, Ariel, Daith, a whole host of other characters are going to be the ones that it's going to be chasing. It would be a very different route. So the answer to this is, it depends on what Morghur is. I gave 2 examples of what it could be, but I could probably build another 4 or 5 if we just had time, because Morghur isn't explained, but we get lots of details about what what it could be. So the answer is either yes or no.
I know this isn't what you meant by it, but it's very funny to imagine Morghur catching human Myrmidia and like about to eat her. He goes, "Ugh, human, ugh," just throws her away. Ugh, that's not what I wanted. I thought that was Hoeth for a second. Come here, man. Tired of 25. You guys should do the challenge stone for my birthday. Oh, as a Lorebeards thing. I mean, the challenge stone would be a fun discussion at some point. I don't know if we could get a whole stream out of the challenge show, but it might be a fun thing.
No, I mean, we've managed to squeeze. Look how long we did it with Arbal. Arbal has like 2 paragraphs.
Maybe one day. Happy birthday. Sorry, off topic. Watching last week's episode, Andy, what species do you think is the most effective at wielding Olgu? Is it the gnomes?
So, the most effective and deadly at wielding it, the Slan. The answer is always the Slan. They are the peak. They always will be the peak. After the Slan, then you're looking at Chaos Sorcerers. Because they often reach almost god tier capability, even though you might not necessarily think that. Chaos is one of these factions that has been written way over the top. Egrim Van Horseman is just one example of many, and I do mean many, and there will be ones out there who are significantly better than him at other Winds of Magic, and particularly Grey. But if we're just looking at who is broadly as a species the most capable, then yeah, now we're talking the gnomes. That's when they step up. Elves are going to be kicking around there too. The dragon blooded are going to be kicking around there, and how they manifest their versions of it too. There's all manner of individuals across the world that'll do it, but as individuals, Slan.
Kobo, it's very funny to me that since the Azrai are the most xenophobic, the elves isn't even an exaggeration. The Druki actively employ ogres as guards. The Azrai would never allow ravenous ogres to exist in Athel Loren. Yep.
Completely correct, Kobo. And the Azrai are horrendous.
Yep.
But at the same point, individuals aren't. Entire courts will have people in, including ogres. But again, we're talking general here. Specific, no, the Azrai can actually be quite welcoming. But when we're talking in general, they are exceedingly speciesist. They are the worst.
Yeah. So back to Morghur.
Because we have to get there eventually.
Yeah. So before I get into some more like timeline oriented things, the other thing I want to talk about his nature is one of the things that I love so much about Morghur is that Morghur is a character. So we've talked a bit about how he changes everything around him. He's just got a mutation stuff. But the thing about him that's truly fascinating is it doesn't just apply to flesh. Morghur has this awful rule that really encapsulates just how fucking terrifying he is, which is called the spirit essence of chaos. You're aware of it because it's what allows him to create chaos bond and other stuff. But there's another side to it. And the other side to it is that Morghur has a rule, which is insane, but they explain it from a lore perspective, which is that it states that if anyone ever casts a spell or shoots him with something from more than 12 inches away, it has no effect. And in the lore, this is explored as the Wood Elves or other armies. If you try and unleash magic or shooting, like waves of arrows against Morghur, before the arrows can get to him, they change. They turn into horrifying bird creatures or sand or insects or centipedes or whatever. Cannonballs fired at him just warp into some other bizarre thing that he has this aura around him that Morghur quite literally in the rules, not just the lore, but in his rules says he is completely invulnerable from more than 12 inches away. You have to get close to him. And it's so busted that in his like full glory, his 6th edition version, it said that if you fire any template abilities and it even touches his base, the whole template doesn't count.
Yep.
So like, oh, you fired a dragon, like, well, actually Dragon Breath Fire would have to be within 12 inches, but like you fire a flame cannon and it hits what should have been a wave of beastmen and then Morghur at the end. No, it doesn't, because Morghur's mutating aura just transmutes into something harmless. But the fact that he does it to spells as well fascinates me. Because normally when you have a rule that's like, oh, it prevents you from being hit by stuff, that's usually where you say, except for magic.
Yep.
Where spellcasting gets around that. Morghur is so fucked up. He's such a violation of both the laws of the ether and the physical world. He unmakes everything that doesn't get so close to him that it's able to strike him because there's not enough time for it to transmute to something harmless, which is fucking bizarre. That is a insane, weird, freakish power, because it, like, the most powerful, a Slann can unleash a terrible cataclysmic spell at Morghur, and if it's too far away, the spell just completely collapses in on itself before it gets to him.
Yep,
which is
totally
bonkers.
So if you were listening near the beginning of the stream and we heard of the fight between Kurt Helborg and a Grail Knight, yeah, that wouldn't stand here, because the cannon would fire and the cannon would not hit, because that cannonball would become something else. It would be utterly ineffective against him. And this is something that would apply regardless of what the weapon is. It doesn't matter how high or low tech it is. It doesn't matter whether it's magical or non-magical. It literally doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't work. Morghur walks through it. That great aura of change that sits about him, that well in which he sits, where the world around is being constantly mutated into something else. It's not just that it protects him, it is him. You get within his sphere of influence, you're screwed. And the only way to be able to fire at him is to literally be around about 20 feet away from him. And then fire, so by the time that arrow or whatever else it is hits him, it doesn't change that much yet. But other than that, anything coming from beyond that will change before it hits him. It is a proper bullshit rule that on the tabletop I think works beautifully, because all too often characters were picked out with a variety of weird things, particularly in those editions. 6th edition, much less so. But it's not that overpowered in terms of game balance, because, you know, you just don't use those weapons against that character. Problem solved. You take him in close combat, okay, or you shoot very close or whatever. It's not a big thing, but in terms of the impact to the Warhammer world and the story it's telling, it really does speak to the extraordinary capabilities of this particular character, where literally anything from God down to mouse he is immune to.
Yeah, and the thing that makes it worse is that Morghur, that's not where his defenses end. Because Morghur's mutation affects his own body. His own body is writhing and changing. Morghur regenerates like a motherfucker. Where there are...
I don't think he has in his rules, though, as I recall. I'm going to actually check that up.
Yeah, not
because he does do it. Because he does it in the Elven army list. He does it in... he does it all over the place. Where I mean, he's born and he's all twisted and broken, blasted apart, and he just starts regenerating back into place. Pretty sure it's not in his rules, but it's definitely a core part of his lore. Yeah, is that he regenerates.
Yeah, I think maybe they gave it to him in his hero version.
I'm going to go check.
But yeah, no, you're right, because I know in Total War he has regen, and it's a big part of his story, but I don't think he has it in his actual rules, which is really funny.
He absolutely should.
Yeah, so yeah, no, in his original rules he doesn't have it, which is stupid. But in the Total War did get that right about him, is that they gave it. Because there are multiple times where he is quite literally stabbed, shot, being crushed, and his body just starts putting itself back together. He starts mutating new limbs, and he just gets up. One of the things that and just like further madness of that, if you're a wizard and you get close to him, he has dispel dice. He's not a wizard, but he gets dispel dice, because fuck you, that's why. One of the things that is talked about with Morghur is that Morghur is such a disruption in the natural the reality applying rules to itself, that it talks about that the winds of magic become so unstable in his presence that they just don't function properly. So spellcasters, if you're too far away from them, the spell just doesn't work. But even if you get in close, the winds of magic are so hard to grasp, so difficult to grab onto and focus on him, that spellcasting within range of him is very difficult. It's possible, but it's hard. And then the last thing, when it comes to like dealing with him, just showing the levels of defenses that he has, how hard to kill he is his skull weave, which is unfortunately not.
You're going to bring up the skull weave. Yeah, it's got to be done.
Which is not an item that he has yet until the war, and I've been bugging him about it forever. But so Morghur, you may notice that he's got this, he's got this big weave. He's got this like weird, horrible leather mask on. He's got all this hair that flows down his body. and there's a bunch of skulls woven into it. One of the descriptions about Morghur that's terrifying is that when Morghur is shambling around, these skulls are flowing always through his hair. Like new ones are like these skulls scream constantly. He has like people that have died or entities he's eaten or something woven into his hair, and they scream for all of eternity. And it's this horrible, shrieking awfulness that not only makes him terrifying, as it rightly should, but it's so disharmonious and nightmarish that it makes getting in to fight him difficult. Like, he literally has rules of you take penalties to swing at him because there's a constant cacophony of agony surrounding his presence. I mean, he is literally the closest thing I've ever seen in the rules to, this is a incomprehensible nightmare horror that reality does not work on. And if you get close enough where you can stab him with something that will work on him, he makes it really, really hard, because just witnessing him is a horrific experience.
Yeah, so what we've got is, when I first read it, it's a beastman. No. The form that he takes as we move into the end times is a pretty consistent beastman, but previous iterations of him have been entirely warping and changing. I would suggest that the regenerate rule would be a previous version of him rather than the version that's in the end times, because in the previous versions, when he was, for example, being zapped by Ariel, literally regenerating, and it's not because it's a wizard or anything similar, it's because that was a core component of what that birth had. The current birth appears to be somewhat different, the one with the big long skull weaves and all the rest of it. This one is utterly terrifying, surrounded by beastmen that go wild and go absolutely mad, calling upon the destruction of all civilization, because it is haunted by the images of the destruction of the world that it's constantly seeing, because time itself doesn't make a great deal of sense to its senses. It is seeing both the end and potentially the cataclysm all at once. It is all coming down, and the only thing that it sees clearly through it all, apparently, is the elven gods, and when it does, it goes for them. And beastmen, as a nice little last addition, do not just simply go up to him and go, hey, yeah, I'm glad to be on your side because you look like a beastman. They are drawn from thousands of miles around. This isn't just a, I've heard he's over there, I'm going to go over there and see what's going on. They are literally drawn to him in the most literal sense from thousands of miles around, and they gang up in enormous herds around where he is. And then wherever he walks, and he does not walk in a normal way because he's a bit broken. He shambles forward sometimes, then he stops, then he sprints, then he shambles a bit. In terms of his first rules, he had completely random movement. He moved like Chaos Spawn across the battlefield. He was an absolute mess, and all the beastmen are the same. Everything's mutating around them. He is quite literally a force of nature, both in terms of how he's described and also how you play with him. You're like, random movement, I have no control over where this is going.
I'm going that way, I don't know how far.
Gonna go. Let's see how it goes. He is extraordinarily powerful for a tabletop character, even though they've managed to curtail and hold it within a very reasonable amount of stats, because the version that they present in Warhammer is eminently killable. He can be killed, but if you're just a normal person, you're almost certain to turn into spawn and mutate or some other horror in the process of trying to do so. And as it's stated, with the multiple elves who we are probably going to go on to, who attempt to bring him down, because they're immune to mutation, they can get in close, and some of them give it a damn good go. And some succeed and some do not, because he does die several times. But it's tough to kill him. Really tough.
Yep.
And the corruption that comes with it is the worst.
Yep, I'm going to go ahead and go through the super chats real quick, and then we're going to talk about him actually in the timeline.
Hey!
Adam, could Morghur be an elven god that fell to chaos? That could be a reason he's going after the other elven gods, why the Pantheon is broken, can't mount a full defense against the chaos gods.
Right, so I think your first mistake there is thinking that the elven gods are for elves only. The elven gods are quite clearly marked as gods. They're not marked as elven gods. They're just gods. Now, they were particularly associated with the elves because they thought the elves were perfect. The elves were their creation. The elves were whatever you wish to describe them as to these gods. But they are just gods. Now, depending on the version of the lore we go with, End Times presents a slightly different version. Before that, again, a slightly different version. There's different ways we could approach this, but ultimately, they are just gods. So if Morghur is a god, then the answer to this is yes. Because they're etheric entities. Very powerful etheric entities. They are akin to each other. Now, if you wish to build pantheons out of them, like, for example, gods are getting together and having children or not having children, that's something you can easily do. The elves have certainly done that. Humans have done that also. Many of the elven gods are worshipped by humans under different names, but the humans also have their own gods or lesser gods or spirits or whatever else. Some claim that those spirits are nothing more than facets of chaos gods. It's all nonsense loosely. They are all individual etheric entities in their own ways, but the answer to this one is directly, could it be an elven god? Take out the word elf, then yes.
That. Metagana, do you think Morghur would eat non-elven gods like dwarf ancestor gods and give it the chance? Probably, but it's hard to say. Well,
dwarf ancestor gods, the dwarf ancestor gods are a very different kettle of fish to say the elven gods, which I've now just said aren't elven gods, they're just gods. But they are clearly different. They have a different form of manifesting. They are very material. Dwarves are material. They can in no way influence the aether, and in turn, the aether does not influence them. The ancestor gods appear to be more akin to creations of the old ones than they are standard gods. At least they did, through the Glittering Realm, receive orders, receive communication, whatever it may be, from the old ones. So this one here, I would suggest that very possibly Morghur couldn't even see them.
Yeah, what I will say is, what's interesting is the dwarves do have their own specific name for Morghur. They call him Gordum. Like, he's known to the dwarves. He's in the Great Book of Grudges. We don't know why. We have no idea whatsoever what happened between Morghur and the dwarves where they became so acutely aware of him that they gave him his own name. But something happened there. So it could be that there's something the dwarves have that he can sense or detect. Which, if that's the case, there might be something there, but it's super vague.
So Metaganon, if you're looking to see this in a slightly different light, I'll give you a very different way of looking at this in general, and possibly looking at the ancestor gods as a whole. And that's that the dwarves are entirely material, loosely speaking. That's their shtick. They don't really have that soul essence in the aether in the same way that other species do. They're very different in how their souls manifest and work. That we know. Which means that if we go by our standard Cygor vision or Morghur vision, they're going to be almost invisible to him. But that doesn't mean that they're invisible to I mean, he's still a horrific entity. If he passes by a hold, we have horror and war ahead of us. A mutation everywhere. Dwarves mutate. Not very quickly. They're far slower to mutate than humans, but they still mutate. So we're going to got very real reasons for why they may have met in the past. But I would argue by this line, and it isn't the official line, this is just an argument, that if they are largely invisible to him, then it makes sense why Grimnir can hold a Chaos Gate. The demons can't see him. They literally can't see him. He is sitting there in the Chaos Gate that they're trying to get past, and he's invisible to them all because he is a dwarf. He is the ultimate expression of the dwarves, which means he has no etheric element. The bits that they see, because their senses are entirely etheric, he's invisible to, and he just carves the demons up without any real danger. I mean, they lash out wildly at the invisible thing. There's real danger, but he's Grimnir. So the answer to this one, if you went with that one, would be he absolutely wouldn't be able to simply scoff up the dwarf ancestor gods because he probably can't even see them. But that would be one interpretation. Don't in any way take that as the official gospel, because another writer will come along and almost certainly say, yes, dwarves got huge souls, and completely change everything.
Yeah. That being said, you could also run with the idea that it might not be the dwarfs that Morghur's after, but something in their holds that they unintentionally built a hold around. That
definitely, I think that makes for a great story.
Which would make him nightmarish to deal with because he's not even there for the dwarfs. They just happened to be in the way.
Yeah, agreed. I think that makes for a cool story.
Old Man Soul, happy birthday, Sotek. Thank you for the hours of entertainment. Currently playing the Old Worlds mod and Bangalore Toon recruiting Minotaurs as well, which I know it's wrong, but damn, it's fun. I mean, to be fair, the Wood Elves are known for redirecting things. Like they do redirect a Minotaur horde into the Empire to be like, go not be our problem. So you could think of it that way. Tyrant, what would happen if Morghur encountered their maw? He'd probably get eaten and then reincarnate somewhere, which we'll talk about in a little bit. There are limits to his transformation powers. The Maw's a little big for him to really, I think, be a threat to. Necromancer Cobalt, Morghur was my first Total War 3 victory. His passive damage and tank stacks, including 100% missile resistance, are gigantic, overpowered, but fun. Yeah, he's like I said, the multiplayer community loves Morghur. His survivability is bonkers. He's very hard to kill, which is great. I just want him to be better in campaign. The Predator rules 75. Happy birthday, Sotek. How would greenskin magic work against Morghur? There's a question. I remember you saying that greenskin magic works differently, so I'm curious. So, yeah, the psychic
same
power...
as everyone else.
Yeah, I think the psychic power of the greenskin would run into the same problem, which is that...
Exactly the same problems.
It does... Although they are very wild and kind of crazed, it does work upon certain rules within reality, and the whole point of Morghur is that he breaks all of those down. That things around him that rely on some sort of structure, which Wa magic, whether you think it's purely a psychic power or it has a winds of magic element to it, does require certain structure to function, and Morghur disrupts it.
The greenskins work within the material realm completely. They've got their own etheric entities that lie on the other side, your Mork and Gorks. Or eventually Morka Gorka. Hey, Gorka Morka, pardon me. It's going to be exactly the same stuff. They throw their magic, and it's going to be corrupted and turned into something else because that is the nature of this entity.
How does Morghur's staff and Skullweave stay the same when he has 12-foot order that mutates everything? So when things get Morghur's one of my favorite descriptions of him, if you go read the opening to Gardens of the Forest, is that his Skullweave and his staff are changing. They do change with him. It talks about that his hand gripping the staff melds into it and melds back, and the material it's made out of changes subtly. The staff is in part made out of the cave that he likes to hang out in all the time, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Morghur
Cave.
They are things that they change, but they have become a part of him. They change with him, but they are him.
Yeah, so I think there's something that's worth pointing out here. His primary point of change is living shit. Immaterial stuff, like say for example, he walks along and all the living stuff around him dies and blackens and twists into something new. All the spells that are coming towards him are in their own way sort of that's not quite true. There's all manner of stuff that and it comes. Now I'm going to contradict myself. I'd say it's deeper than that.
Yeah, for me, I would say the big thing is that they are no longer simple material items. They are literally a part of him because they show up in his other forms theoretically as well. They are things that are supposedly reappear when he does.
Yeah.
I don't think this version of him is the only version that's had a skull weave. I think every version.
I think that's absolutely the case.
Which means
I reckon he's relatively consistent because that is the nature of the material realm. The material realm always moves towards form, and he is an entity which is an entity of pure, like all etheric entities, they represent something. So when that something hits the material realm, that representation is made flesh. And this representation, the flesh that we have here, is huge Beastman. In the same way that when a greater demon of one of the gods arrives, they generally always take a similar form because they are pure concept made real by the material realm by which they are bound. And the material realm is binding him according to its own bit. So I have no real issue with him not changing and all the bits around him being largely subject to change, but it's not pure change here. It's not as he walks forward, the 12 foot underneath him starts turning into sea, into gibbering hands, into all the rest of it. It's far, far more subtle than that. It's when something lethal comes at him that the change hits much harder. And when something living comes at him, the change hits hard as well. But it often seems to be much more when it's coming at him with aggression, which I think is actually quite interesting because that's tied directly through to his rule. for spells and range shots changing.
One of the things that's interesting about like the brace staff in particular is it's noted in the original brace staff description that the staff itself constantly moves and writhes as if it's a living thing in his grip. So a lot of the aspects about him are not
consistent.
They change as well as he does. Magladroth, Morghur instead of Malagor should have been sent against Nagash to try and stop his final ascension. Picture siege. I don't think it would have made sense for him to go there. We should have had a big. You know what should have happened is in the big finale arc when Athel Loren becomes under attack and like essentially gets destroyed. It should have been Morghur, not fucking Kabanda for some stupid ass reason.
Morghur should have been taking down Athel Loren. Morghur should have probably been also responsible for the takedown of Bretonia.
Yeah, I think Malagor going up against Nagash in Sylvania was perfectly fine. 10,000 ants. Oh, thank you for the happy birthday. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Angus, you two inspired me to start running the enemy within for my friends. Awesome. I love that. That's the first time we heard that today. That's great. Would Morghur try to eat Sigmar given his shaky status as a god?
So my first answer to this would be shaky status as a god is a very subjective way of viewing Sigmar. My first if we're talking what the background definitely says, rather than what people inside the setting say, there is no shaky status here. Literally none. He is a god. It's as simple as that. Now, could Morghur eat him? Well, he would need to be in the material realm for that to happen, which then leads to the next question. Has Sigmar ever manifested as Sigmar? And the answer to that is no. But the answer is yes to has he inhabited others? And that appears to be yes, particularly look at the end time lore. So could that aspect be eaten? Yes, I reckon so. But would Morghur do it? And again, refer to the previous answer. The question is, what's Morghur chasing? And if Morghur is chasing just godlike entities in the material realm, then if, say, for example, Karl Franz was inhabited by Sigmar, then Karl Franz would be on the menu boys. Alternatively, if he's after elven gods, then no, he's got other things that he's chasing.
So one thing I'll note is that in the Beastman book, and I think this is deliberate, there is a big bad who hates the gods of humanity, and it's Malagor. If you go back and watch our Malagor stream, Malagor is the character that if he found out that there was anything to do with Sigmar, he's coming after it sooner or later. Morghur doesn't seem to really give a shit about the human gods. Like he actively just kind of ignores them, and I'm going to prove that to you in just a minute. Of Morghur, I really do think has a particular focus on the elf gods for whatever reason. They do seem to be his obsession, his appetite. Malagor is the one that's running around doing other things. That being said, I will say if you're playing a campaign you want to use Morghur and you do want to expand him to be like all gods, something you could do if you want to make a really fucking terrifying version of Morghur is having him be meandering, blind, wandering on the battlefield, and then if one of your players invokes a prayer, Morghur locking on. Like, the second they manifest a divine power, he immediately notices them and just beelines for them in like true horror movie fashion. That would be a good way to fuck with your players and make your wizard or your priest players shit their pants.
I reckon that'd be a good way of doing it as well. Good use from Mangus.
Yeah, because just that could be very fun of making your thing like, hey, you can invoke a prayer, but if Morghur's close enough, however many miles away, he might start meandering towards you if you abuse those powers. Singemeister, and Morghur's model, he's standing on these weird twisted roofs. Is there any lore on that? No, it's just him messing up stuff around him. It's just
him messing crap up. That's pretty much exactly what it is.
Yeah. How does Morghur fit into the great plan? I would say it's probably not a huge wager that he, well, depending on how you look at it, the Slán would very much say he's not. I'll leave it at that.
And I agree completely. If we're going with the traditional story, he is a living manifestation of why the plan went wrong. The Beastmen were never supposed to rise up. They were not part of the plan. And Morghur, in many respects, it's almost an anthropomorphization of that, although he's more divine in nature, really. Morghur is bad, so he doesn't. But there are certainly stories you could tell, given the lore as it stands, where the great plan was for Chaos to destroy this world. And if that's the case, then he's a part of a great plan, but perhaps not the end goal.
Warboss Smogjaw, happy birthday, Sotek. Was wondering for a while if the Beastmen would worship Hashut. It would help fill out the limited roster of the choice with heavily armored Beastmen variants. I would say probably not, because the Beastmen have one very consistent theme, which is that they desire to return the world to a very primal state. And the Chaos Hashit in particular stands very opposed to that. Hashit is a god of industry and forward advancing and arguably civilization. With, like, if anything, he would be the antithesis of the Beastmen along the chaos spectrum.
Yeah, I agree completely. We are looking at two almost divinely opposed positions here. And the only reason that I would ever include something like Beastmen with Chaos Dwarves is if you created a host of special rules for slaves that you are basically putting on the battlefield. Which means that you could have, say, humans or elves or dwarves or anything else. There could be no elves over there, but you know what I mean. Slaves that work within the Chaos Dwarf setup, but they've already got that largely covered with all of their greenskins, so there's no need for that. I would say it would be far better if you wanted to add in them as a slave race anywhere, to include them with, say, the Dark Elves, who will be enslaving Beastmen with impunity. And the Beastmen aren't going to like that, but then I don't think anybody likes what the Dark Elves do. So, yeah, I don't think that this would be a good idea. Now, would they worship Hashut? I think the best way to answer that is, do you believe Skaven would worship Hashut? Because I think they're in almost exactly the same place.
Yeah, that's fair. Sensmeister, Mole Rat, Beastman Legend Lord to go after the Ancestor God. Sure, why not? All right, so talking about timeline stuff. So Morghur is, as we talked about, there are hints and whispers. It's never confirmed. The Beastmen are a race that have very deliberately never been given much of a timeline. Even in their, like, the Beasts of Chaos 6th edition book, they're given a timeline, but it's only for the Drakkwald. And it's only for, like, a very narrow focus of time, and it's mostly about the Drakkwald province. And, like, its nature with Beastmen, and then it kind of focuses on Khazrak at the end. And it's mostly about Khazrak. Whereas the 7th edition book just didn't have a timeline at all.
7th edition was definitely an edition for lore haters.
Yeah. And then, of course, they did not get an 8th edition book, which really sucked, because 8th edition went pretty heavy on timelines. Every army had, like, a 2-page spread for 8th. But
wood elves?
Well, the elves had, like, a fucking so many timeline pages. But the thing for the Beastmen is we don't know when Morghur exactly first popped up. There are, of course, like, mentions and myths about that he dates back to the Cataclysm, maybe before it even, but he's been around for a really long time. But the first time he shows up is a little over 1,000 years before Sigmar, when Ariel and Orion become Ariel and Orion. And Ariel, in her new position, detects that there's this aberration somewhere in the weave, like the network of you could almost think of it as like the world soul or nature or whatever you want to call it, the circle of life. And she senses Morghur from thousands of miles away. And she, as we spoke about, goes over and kicks his ass. And if you go watch the Durthu stream, you'll know that this was the biggest fuck up Ariel ever did in her entire life. Was that she revealed herself to Morghur, which was really dumb. She should not have done that, because not only does she fail to kill him because she didn't realize that he's very, very hard to kill, but Morghur gets her scent essentially and goes, I know what this is. I want more of this, and he follows her back to Athel-Loren. And we get our first great war of Athel-Loren, where Morghur takes a shockingly long, I like to add another ing there, shockingly long time to kill. And he's a nightmare. One of the things that's revealed is that the wood elves, the elves themselves, actually do a pretty good job of dealing with Morghur when they're fighting him and dealing with the Beastmen.
Yeah.
The problem is the forest spirits. Because when the spirits get too close to Morghur, they start going berserk. They start mutating. They start attacking the elves. And it all builds up over the course of this really, really ugly war to them finally bringing Morghur down at the battle around a Diabok, which was the tree for Drycha. I think this is the war where that happened. And Morghur is finally killed by a combined effort of Coadil and Ariel, where Coadil, like, picks him up and is crushing him, and Ariel flies up and just unleashes everything she has on him. But by doing this, once again, go check out the Durthu stream. While they may have killed Morghur, two big problems. A, Morghur's blood, when he dies, instantly corrupts a Diavok and the entire glade. What was once one of the most beautiful, beloved glades in Athel-Loren becomes a twisted hellfest that will literally never recover. It becomes known as the Glade of Woe, and it never, ever comes back. It is, no matter what the Wood Elves do, no matter how powerful they get, no matter what, like the sap of the Oak of Ages, none of that shit. Nothing is ever able to heal the corruption of Morghur's blood because he's that intensely fucked up.
And I think this is a point where we have to pause and just take a moment to consider what that means. Because Athel-Loren is not just divinely protected. It's not only suffuse with all of the magics. It was created by the Old Ones, using ancient, not just magics, but technologies. It should be beyond the realms of almost anything to properly corrupt. During the worst of the Cataclysm, it was still largely impenetrable. It survived. It pushed through. And Morghur fucks it. That means Morghur is not a beastman. Morghur is not a simple greater demon. Because a demon, any greater demon, won't do that. We could have greater demons and Nurgle wandering through that forest. We did during the end times. During, well, the Cataclysm. And it all got pushed back. The forest recovered. Completely recovered. It returned to its original state. This is not the case for Morghur, because he's clearly something else, something more. The corruption that lies within him is beyond a simple entity. And I'd use the word simple here in the broadest of terms, in that simple as we look on with almost God view from the outside of the setting and can say, well, there's greater demons, there's lesser demons, there's beasts of chaos, there's various least little tiny demons. What the hell is Morghur? And the answer to this is now given some framing. By this, the fact that he permanently taints, Athel-Loren the Pure, quite clearly marks him out as something that is above and beyond anything else that's currently meandering about the world. Which means, again, we have to loosely say, yeah, it's God. This is a God. And it's a god that's coming, its power is out there, the material realm is here, and it's keeping on pushing in and trying to get in and failing. And the Chaos Gods realize how powerful this entity is, and they're very much pushing them towards that sort of shit, because that's what they would want. And I don't think it's in those gods are saying, go, Morghur, go! Or even they're sitting there whispering to him. No, it's not anything like that. They are much more primal as entities themselves. It's just they're not going to be there while Morghur is pushing through. They won't be stopping him. So cut a long story short, he is extraordinary, and the elves are in trouble, as we will see. They keep on trying to kill him.
Yeah, so this, of course, ends up being really, really bad, because this also corrupts Coadil, one of the only remaining true elders of the forest, one of the true ancients. Once again, go watch the Durthu stream. The ramifications are horrible, and tragedy abound. And this is just the first time he dies. This is literally the first time they managed to kill Morghur. He basically completely fucks up about half of the remaining elders of the forest, because there's only 2 at this point.
Yeah.
And actually, no, that's not true. I don't know who's still alive. There's
3.
Not for long though. And Drycha goes off the deep end. So he has a horrible effect on the forest. And the relationship between the elves and the forest spirits will never be the same. He has driven a spike right into the heart of that relationship, because many of the forest spirits, quite rightly, blame the elves for Morghur coming to there in the first place.
Yep.
Because Morghur didn't come there until there were elven gods. Then he came. So, problem solved. Morghur's dead. Well, turns out Morghur's worse than a demon, because Morghur he dies, full on, completely, utterly dead, except for not only does he leave behind this physical body that corrupts everything around it forever permanently, But Morghur is reborn only a few hundred years later. And Morghur is reborn very close to Athel Loren. Like, his rebirth is not guaranteed where he shows up, but he shows up close to where he wants to be. And he shows up, he gets reborn, and the Wood Elves slowly become aware of the fact that, oh shit, this guy's back. And the truth that is revealed, to put it very bluntly, is you cannot kill Morghur.
Yeah.
He is completely, utterly immortal. Because if you kill him, all you've done is you've done the equivalent of, like, stripping the smallest amount of dead skin cells off of a giant. And he simply comes back in a new body. Now, the downside to Morghur is that he does have to grow up. One of the things we see consistently in this story is that he's born as an infant, and it does take him several years, like a good bit, before he reaches maturity and adulthood, where the Beastmen will protect him during that time. But the first time, the Wood Elves don't know this. So Morghur is reborn fairly close to Athel Loren, and this is where we get the really juicy thing, and once again, shows how bad Ariel fucked up. So if you go and watch our Lady of the Lake stream, or have heard any of our talks about Ladriel, you will know that Ladriel is a sneaky bitch. She is the best goddess in the setting at remaining hidden, at remaining disguised. She is the Lady of the Lake, to put it very bluntly. I don't give a fuck what the end type says, because it was stupid bullshit, and I hope they fix that in the old world, but all that aside.
Yeah, they probably won't.
Yeah, you have a elven goddess, whoever it may be, definitely Ladriel, who is very, very good at hiding and disguising themselves, and they walk the mortal world, but people cannot find them. When Morghur comes back for the second time, even though he has never met her, never seen her, Morghur does not go to Athel Loren because he catches the scent of something else, and he heads up west into the mountains. And the Wood Elves go, where the hell is he going? And they start tracking him. And it turns out that Morghur caught the scent of another elven god at the Silver Spire, which is this great lake place where water comes down from the mountains and flows into the lands of Bretonia, feeds the western lands out of the Grey Mountains. And it turns out that the Lady of the Lake is up there. That is where Ladriel is. And Morghur is tracking her like a fucking hound dog. And Ladriel realizes in this story she can't get away from him. So she calls her mortal champions, and Gilles Le Breton himself answers the call. He gathers an army, says, the lady has come to me in a vision. We must ride for this mountain. They ride up to the Silver Spire, and the elves realize, oh shit, there's a god here. And oh shit, these waters feed Athel Loren. And oh shit, Morghur's going right for them. So Orion calls the Wild Hunt and beelines for the Silver Spire. And we get a titanic fight where Orion fights side by side with Gilles Le Breton. This is the first time, so big deal, the first time the Bretonians fight alongside the Wood Elves, and it's against Morghur, and it is an ugly fight. But Orion is able to get up close on Morghur and quite literally rips him limb from limb. But
I mean, pretty upset after what happened to Ariel, you see.
Yeah, he was definitely getting vengeance for his girlfriend. He was pretty pissed.
Yeah, he's pretty pissed. It's also worth noting that this isn't one of our the background hints. It suggests that it could be. No, we're not saying that. This is the Lady of the Lake that it's chasing, and the Lady of the Lake, the Wood Elves mistakenly refer to as, well, perhaps accurately refer to as the Lady of the Mists, but in this particular case, they call her Corrigan, almost like it's the daughter of Ladriel, and they get a little bit confused. But it is the Lady of Mists. It's quite literally Ladriel.
Yeah, she's
the goddess is there.
The Wood Elves are like, that can't be Ladriel. We recognize Ladriel. That can't be Ladriel. And Ladriel's like, yeah, sure, totally.
Yeah. And all being Ladriel, who is quite literally the goddess of trickery and hiding. Well, not trickery, but at least hiding would be a good way of putting it. She poses as someone else entirely, and they refer to her, at least the entity that they believe she is, as Corrigan.
Yeah. So we have this big old thing, and once again, so Orion kills him, and this cements a good alliance. And fortunately for them, they managed to kill him far enough away from the Silver Spire that he doesn't corrupt the waters, which would have been really bad.
Funny,
but once again, though, this is another elven god that Morghur has not had the pleasure of meeting yet, getting up in his face. And Morghur, now with the scent of Orion, also Kurnos, and Ariel, Isha, on his nostrils, turns his attention back to Athaloran.
Mm-hmm.
And Ladriel is able to slip away from his attention.
Which is very Ladriel.
Yeah, and very likely moves her headquarters saying, oh, we can't stay here no more.
In fact, we know from various stories that her court now, from pretty much this point forward, goes on the move. And it's never in one place at one point from this point forward. Beforehand, she held court. And then after this, she slips from place to place to place to place, moving around Bretonnia from piece of water to piece of water to piece of water, taking along her entire court, all the humans that are with her, all the elves that are with her, all the crazy spirits that are with her as well. So this is almost the foundation point of what will become the modern version of the Lady of the Lake, which has got this mobile court. Before this, she was almost holding in one place, organizing whatever it was she was organizing.
Yeah, which shows how fucking genuinely clever Ladriel is, because she is really the only goddess that manages to slip Morghur's attention.
Yep.
Unfortunately, the Athaloran gods do not have this option. They are grounded in a central location, which means that they are perpetually under siege. The next big time, Morghur resurrects again in Morghur. So Morghur pops up again about 1,000 or maybe like 2,000-ish years later, where he crops up in it's about 1,000 years later. He crops up in like 1117 of the Imperial calendar, and this time he pops up in the Forest of Shadows, which is further up in the Empire. And here he starts building up power, but Ariel strikes him first, because Ariel is in her not doing okay mentally health-wise phase, where she has been delving deep into dark magic, and Ariel, like Andy talked about, Ariel got mentally corrupted. And in her corruption, she comes to this obsessive idea that if she could just consume enough power, if she could just gain enough raw power, she can become so strong of a god that Athaloran will never be threatened again. And at this point, she has stopped resurrecting Orion. Like, she's lost the plot. She is down a really ugly path. And she goes after Morghur. She goes through the world routes with a big army of wood elves. They attack Morghur in his own grove, but something unexpected happens, which is they don't try to kill Morghur, they just try to capture him. Mm-hmm. And they succeed. And a part of me would suggest that Morghur isn't entirely against what's about to go down. Which is that Ariel convinces herself that if she can devour Morghur rather than the other way around, she will become impossibly powerful. If she can eat him, devour everything that he is, and take him into herself, she will become beyond. And she, once again, does the dumbest fucking thing in the world, which I love about Ariel. I'm not saying this is bad writing. I love this about her, but it's a stupid thing to do, which is that she brings Morghur through the world routes, which is horrible. Horrible.
I can see Durthu crying again.
Yeah, and she pops up in the King's Glade with Morghur and prepares a ritual to basically devour him. And Durthu, if you go watch our stream, comes crashing through the woods going, what the fuck? Like, you did the equivalent of, like, going through... I mean, that's literally like someone just taking pure raw cancer, just injecting it straight to your heart. And Durthu runs up and uses his big old cool date sword to just butcher the captured Morghur before Ariel can finish her ritual. He just destroys him, cuts him to pieces. Ariel's furious. Right. Once again, Morghur, by not actually doing anything, causes a huge division between the elves and the forest spirits. Mm-hmm. This one is only resolved when Adenhu quite literally kills himself by taking in all of the corruption, the mental corruption of Ariel into himself, and he's so overwhelmed by what Ariel was carrying because she's part god that Adenhu perishes. Like, his heart, his mind just gives out under the strain. And Morghur achieves an incredible victory without swinging a sword once.
And again, to make that clear, that's one of the very first ever tree men spirits, the old ancients of old, basically
one of
gives his
3
life
left.
to cleanse. Yeah, 1 of 3 left in the world. There used to be loads of them back before the Cataclysm, but during the Cataclysm, they were all cut down by the demons that rose up during the great invasion of chaos at the beginning of the world. And there's only 3 left, and one of them basically gives his life so that Ariel can be cleansed. Nasty.
There are a couple of other times that he pops up. These times he kind of becomes more. The stories of Morghur take a kind of an interesting direction later on, because he dies 2 more times. There's one time, I can't remember exactly when it was, because I'd have to dig it up specifically. There's a time relatively recently. Oh no, I remember now. So there is a time where he gets in a war with the Wood Elves, and he ends up being killed by an archer. Oh god, what's his name?
Scarlock.
Scarlock somehow man,
Because he's Scarlock.
Yeah, and this, once again, only a Wood Elf could do this, of getting close enough to Morghur where he could hit him with arrows while staying far enough away that he doesn't get ripped in half or stabbed or whatever, of quite literally dancing around him, just shooting him over and over. It talks about that Morghur is so full of arrows before he finally drops that it's absurd to look at him. He's pierced with, like, I think it's like 100 arrows before he finally goes down. The last one hitting him like right in the head. And the last time we really get to see him, which is interesting because the old world story we're going to talk about, I initially did not like this story, because in the Beastmen 6th edition book, we get a specific mention that the current Morghur is 300 years old.
300, yeah.
But the 8th edition Wood Elf book introduces a bit of a conflict with this.
Yep.
Where they essentially kill Morghur around the time he should have been around. And it's this ridiculous epic thing where the Wood Elves become aware that Morghur's born, because, fun fact that's also nightmares to imagine, apparently every time Morghur is reborn, a Diavok, the Glade of Woe, screams. So, like, all of the trees, all of the mutated horrible animals, the land itself literally opens up mouths and starts wailing every time he's reborn into reality.
I'm telling you, the dude's a god.
Yeah, which is nightmarish and fucking horrible and not subtle at all, which I actually really, really love.
Yeah.
And so Aeroloth goes out on an adventure because this time Morghur was up in the forest of Arden, which I believe this is what the old world storyline is talking about, which we'll get into in a second. Which is, so this is like, with the old world timing and stuff, this is probably like 30-ish years before
the old world kicks off.
Yeah, so like that 23 or 2270, 2260 ballpark-ish. And Morghur, the first time, Aeroloth goes up with a big army hoping to kill Morghur while he's still a baby. Pull the kill it before it grows up method. Doesn't work out. The Beastmen end up outmaneuvering them. The Wood Elves almost get completely massacred. Aeroloth and Naiath the Prophetess barely escape because the Beastmen defend Morghur like to say that it's like a hive protecting its queen is a grotesque understatement. The Beastmen will throw everything they have to protect Morghur. One thing that's actually shown quite consistently with Morghur is that as long as he is alive, the Beastmen will not break. No matter how bad it gets, no matter how many losses they take, as long as Morghur is still standing, they will keep coming, they will keep fighting. Especially, which is not helped by the fact that Morghur quite literally has a unique brace scream, which is that Morghur screams so loud in both a physical and an etheric sense that he brings all of the Beastmen and monsters from miles around just hurtling towards them. And even if they were running, even if they were completely shattered, they were broken, they instantly rally and come back to him. Mm-hmm. As long as he is alive, the Beastmen just kind of can't lose. Which is why when he dies, the Beastmen always kind of almost seem to come to their senses and flee. Morghur is this just unholy thing. So this little baby he can't defend himself. He can't issue orders. Not that he ever really does, but he can't really do anything. But just his presence alone makes the Beastmen enough of a threat that this strike force of Wood Elves gets completely overwhelmed, and only a handful of them escape. They later, after Morghur has grown to maturity, get a rematch with him in the Forest of Arden. And this is likely what we're seeing in the old world, because there's a Wood Elf symbol in the Forest of Arden. The Wood Elves have a presence there, and there's also a little Beastman symbol. Because the Forest of Arden for a long time is talked about as like this horrible, horrible fucking forest in Bretonnia. Like, it's nasty. There are monsters there. It's that the Red Duke hangs out there. It is not a good place. The Forest of Arden sucks. And Morghur is implied to be at the source of its original corruption, or at least has a big relationship with it. And Erloth goes in there with some Wood Elf buddies for round 2, Electric Boogaloo, and they have this big fight with them. And Erloth gets close enough that he pulls a rather interesting move where he takes a big thing of sap from the Oak of Ages and just throws it in Morghur's face. And instead of birthing life or healing like it normally does, it causes Morghur to catch on fire. He starts burning and screaming, and he basically turns into the Thing from the movie where he's just shrieking in agony as he's being burned. And Erloth is able to stab him and kill him while he's burning, and he dies. Now, once again, he's going to be reborn, as the old world reveals. But in the original 8th edition, this is the last time we ever see Morghur. Yeah. He's killed in the battle at the Forest of Arden, and then the Wood Elves use what's left of the sap to purify the Forest of Arden. They're able to heal it, seemingly because Morghur's, I guess, blood wasn't used to corrupt, because he doesn't explode, he just evaporates, I guess. But somehow they're able to heal enough of the forest that the forest is considered a better place there afterwards, which the old world may actually be running with that story, but doing what 8th edition should have done and talking about what happens afterwards. Because like I said, in 8th edition, this was it. So, and this was like 200 plus years before the old, or before the modern time. Morghur falls off the face of the earth and we never see him again.
Bullshit. Particularly given that the 6th edition and 7th edition version of him is in the modern times. So he's clearly around doing his thing, and if we go by 6th edition dates, he's kicking around throughout that entire battle and somehow doesn't die.
Yeah. So then we get to the old world, where the old world has, and then we'll get caught up on Super Chats and stuff after this. The old world has introduced a new character that I'm very, very excited. Actually, you know what? Let's do Super Chats first. Then we'll do
let's go to Super Chats, because it might take a wee while to chat about him.
Yeah. Let's see. We were here. Tyrant25. Andy. My Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Ogre is toughness 70, strength 70, 65 weapon skill, and has 92 wounds. Is he pushing Tyrant stats? No.
I mean, bless you, Tyrant 25. Let's just quickly, just for anyone out there, mull this down. Toughness 70 and strength 70 is well within human range, which means he's not even at strength 4 yet in terms of Warhammer stats. He is significantly away from what Tyrant would be. His 92 wounds, though, that's pretty freaking impressive. That's a fairly decent stab of wounds. Most humans are very rarely ever going to get beyond 50, 60, although some of them will be hitting about 70, 80. So again, it's a lot of wounds, but it's not as many as you might think. I have PCs that are human who are better than that across the board. And they're not even at hero level in Warhammer. So the answer to this is you're quite some distance from Tyrant stats if you go by the standard scaling of Fantasy Roleplay 4 and not the scaling that is used by the current writers.
Yeah, so Tyrant, you're falling into, I think, a classic issue that so in 2nd edition, there was the general vibe that, a strength 4 means 40%. In 4th edition, that is not at all the case. Not in the slightest. For a genuine Tyrant, I would say, like, you want your strength and toughness in like the 150 plus range at least.
For a Tyrant,
yeah, because Tyrants, I mean, you're talking about a Lord level big badass like Tyrant.
You're going to need a lot, although that's quite a lot. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the strength in 4th edition is covered up by your size. You're looking at least 45 to 50 advances on each, so that's 100 plus your base level. Oh no, that's about 150. No, fuck it. No, you're right. I'm retracting. You're right.
Withdraw. You are a proper scary ogre. I'll give you that. but you know, I would say you're like you're not quite the bruiser. You're getting there. Not quite there yet. James, if Morghur does go after non-elven gods, he also could have been the end times fate of End, including the corruption of beastmen into beastmen. It's possible. I like so much of his narrative. Like, he has been throwing himself at Athel-Loren for about almost 3,000 years by the time of the end times.
But that's because we got Wood Elf background for him. And we do know that he has been around much more than the Wood Elf army list itself. So I'm going to throw in a potential grey into this black and white version of him and say that his lore is very clear that he's at the source of the primary corruptions of most of the corrupt forests in the world. Which means that if we're going to have deep forests corrupted down in Ind, for example, some forested area, jungle or whatever else, then it's very likely that we could have Morghur sitting at the heart of this. So could we do this? I think yes, and it would fit within the background. Is it what I would want to do with him within the end times, though? And I think this is where I now strongly agree with what Sotek says. I would personally rather Morghur was finishing his story as we understand it, at least. And that is that he is the corrupting source of the forests and that he will take down Athel-Loren. He should be the one that takes down Athel-Loren as his primary plot beat and ultimately representing everything that the Beastmen will one day become. So I don't think I'd do this, but I definitely think it's something you could do if you wish to.
Yeah, I would say I think it would be perfectly grand if they win, hopefully they do end, that there's a story about that there was a time Morghur showed up in End and he's killed or defeated, but the place where he died is a horrifying, nasty, ugly part of the jungles, and the tiger men or the creatures that come from there are just
corrupted,
raving
broken,
mad, and they're mutated and horrible. I think it's better to have him that way as opposed to him being like an active force over an End.
Agreed. If I was looking to take out End, I would be looking to take out End with things that were particularly End focused down there, which means we need End stories so that we can then conclude those End stories. I'd rather not bring in external stories simply so that we can tie them together with relatively neat bows. The world's bigger than that.
Jeremiah Safford. So, Beastmen / Wood Elf pals and Lorelord. I mean, they have a better chance than an Athel-Loren, but not by much, I would probably suggest.
Particularly given that the Drakvald is up there too. The taint of Morghur is in that area because the Drakvald forest, as we understand it today, is so dark and filled with beastmen because of Morghur. So there is a bigger story that's being told there as well.
Yeah, it's like the Drakvald is like in the top 3 most fucked forests in the old world. It is a bad place.
It's not good,
Necromancer Cobalt, at the end of all things, would Morghur try and eat the big 4, Hatchet, the Horned Rat, along with their demons and princes? So I would say, see back to Andy's thing about what exactly motivates Morghur. Is he motivated by just elf gods, or is he just motivated by all gods?
Yeah, I will give, let's say he is quite literally just a giant god that's sitting out there and is effectively the beastman version of the Horned Rat, who is manifesting in a very different way. If he's that, then the answer would be he rises at the end of the world in the end times to become a great chaos entity, for want of a better description, and would just be vying with them in the same way that the other gods are vying. They're all too powerful to kill each other. There's none of this, it will try and eat. I mean, you could say the same. Khorne is trying to kill all the other gods. He always is. Slaanesh is trying to corrupt and bring them on side. It always is. They're always working against each other. It'd just be a part of that bigger pattern. It would never succeed because it's pretty much impossible to do so. So the answer to this one I would say is, actually, would it try and eat them? Yeah, it's never going to succeed though.
Yeah.
It's a big war, an eternal war in the realms of chaos.
Holy Artist, does Morghur somehow empower Tzeentch as Morghur chases the way other are? I mean, not in that strict sense. Yeah,
it's a little bit too direct and a little bit too 40k in its simplicity. In that in 40k it is that simple in how it's expressed frequently, particularly with some writers, where in Warhammer it's much more complicated, and it's not just a simple matter of anything that involves change thus makes Tzeentch more powerful, anything that involves mutation thus makes Tzeentch more powerful. The demon gods are much bigger, much simpler, and much more complicated, and also vying with a bunch of other entities. It's a very different world.
Yeah, it kind of falls under that, like, does Sigmar killing a demon with his hammer make Khorne happy? And it's like Khorne might be like, oh, neat, but it's not empowering Khorne.
But it's not necessarily empowering him. Yeah, if anything, it's weakening in some respects. Yeah.
Off-topic question, but elves and dwarves are often, though not always, framed as sort of opposites in terms of behavior, with humans in the middle. Are there any examples where humans would be baffled by elvish dwarfish behavior or attitudes when the other species would kind of be like, no, I do get it? Yes.
Yeah, frequently.
I would say, especially when it comes to attitudes towards like things that people that live for a long time can appreciate better than the short-lived nature of humans, elves and dwarves would have a way more in common mindset than humans would.
Yeah, and I strongly agree with this. Humans don't get other species all the time. All the time. They don't get they often view elven attitudes as weirdly standoffish and uppity and odd, where often they think they're being friendly in their own ways. It's just that they completely misunderstand each other. They often view dwarves in certain ways that they just completely misunderstand. Elves and dwarves, though, they, for all they historically have issues, very much got on with each other because they weren't dying every 30, 40 years. They would be lasting for a far longer time. Halflings somewhat similarly last far longer. Halflings and humans get on with each other because their lifespans are far closer. Dwarves and halflings are relatively close in lifespans, but dwarves and elves are the next step. There's going to be lots of different attitudes that come from their lifespans, their surroundings, their cultures, and humans are just one facet of a far whole. I wouldn't agree that they are seen to sit in the middle. I would suggest in Warhammer they are just there, and the other one's there, and the other one's there, and they all sit in their own islands, and sometimes there's overlap, and sometimes there isn't. It's a giant Venn diagram, rather than necessarily sitting in the middle between one thing and another.
Yeah, and another thing, just for like your roleplay ideas or whatever, is that dwarves and elves have a much more keen and proper understanding for one another of how they have fallen, how the world has degraded, how things are not as good as they used to be. Humans are hilariously short-sighted and only have their own frame of reference and would be like, no, things are getting better. Like, we're advancing all this stuff. Like, humans would not appreciate the rising of chaos and all this other stuff like the dwarves and elves do. Dwarves and elves have so much more experience. And they remember things a lot better than humans.
Yeah, you tend to find that with elves and, say, humans, what often happens is something like this. We are right, we know everything. No, you don't. We know better than you, say the humans. No, we are right, we know everything. No, you don't. And this goes on for a few months until eventually goes, the elves, the humans figure it out for themselves and go, oh, wait a minute, the elves are right. And by the time they're saying that, they die. And the next generation comes along and says, oh, no, you're wrong. My parents told me that you were arrogant and were constantly saying you're right. Yes, but when he died, when he came round to it, he finally came round to our way of thinking. I doubt it. I understand things better than my parents. And it's a constant cycle of having to say the same shit again and again and again and again. You tell the dwarves once, they got it.
No.
Immediate difference between dwarves and humans. The humans just don't get other species in a variety of ways.
Baron von Basser, don't know if this is already answered. How would Norska react to Morghur if he somehow ended up there? I mean, the beastmen of Norska would, actual Norskans, they would probably face off with him. A lot of
fight time.
Yeah,
he's awful.
Norska is a rough place, and a force like Morghur would be something to throw yourself against for the glory of the gods. Yada yada. I mean, killing Morghur there would be glory in that.
I mean, Norska is a huge place with many different cultures, and each one of those cultures is going to react differently. Some of those that are particularly chaos aligned will see him as a challenge. Others that are not will see him as a threat that needs to be stopped. Others will just simply be appalled by everything it represents.
Piss off.
It's a creature of pure change that causes beastmen to go wild around it. It's really dangerous. Most will want nothing to do with it at all. But again, different cultures will react differently. But a simple answer to this is to simplify Norska, which I prefer not to do.
Yeah, honestly, funny enough, Norska would probably be one of the best suited human races to deal with Morghur because they're able to become nomadic on such short notice. Donovan, sorry this bass already, but what if Morghur is eaten by the Great Maw? Yeah, we already answered that, and the answer is he falls in, dies, and gets reborn somewhere else.
And gets reborn. Totally.
Ricky Chapman, how many ogres die trying to eat Morghur? Probably a lot. But I wouldn't put it past them eventually getting him.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if we were doing a full version of everything Morghur had done in its life, right from the beginning, right through to the end. I would suggest that Morghur and the ogres have met more than once, and that ogres, being relatively resistant to mutation in a way that other species aren't, could definitely get close and have the stats to take it out. A really tough ogre will kill it. They will kill it.
Yeah.
And they're better placed to kill it than, say, for example, your average human. No chance at all, almost. So I think that probably one of them have fallen. It wouldn't surprise me if some of the awful, horrible, terrible situation that the ogres are dealing with in their part of the world isn't to some degree influenced by Morghur. It wouldn't surprise me. It doesn't mean it has to be the case, because there's more than enough with giant warpstone comets to justify almost everything there, but I see no reason why you couldn't build that into its background, and I probably would.
Yep. All right, so that takes us to the old world. And I'll give a very brief, just kind of AOS, I do think handled Morghur really well. I actually genuinely adored Morghur in Age of Sigmar, as he's a god. It is revealed he is a full-on god, period. And he is the god of the Beastmen. He's up there with for the Beastmen. He's one of their factions. The sub factions being the Shadowgave was his faction. They're all about chaos spawn, all this stuff. And the only big Beastman special character, who sadly didn't get a mini, but was representing a lot of the major stories until they just randomly decided to kick the Beast of Chaos out of AOS and back to Fantasy, was about Morghur's Prophet. And the old world seems to have gone, oh, we have a Morghur Prophet character who maybe has had a mini in the works for a little bit. Let's just move him to the old world. It wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. Which leads us to Kralma. So Kralma is known as the Prophet of Ruin. And the thing that's interesting about him is he has a very cyclical relationship with Morghur, which I actually really love, which is that Morghur gave a prophecy that there would be a blind beastman born who would bear essentially his favor, and would need to be brought before him. And Kralma is born, and he meets Morghur. He encounters Morghur, and Morghur, you see this actually in the prologue of the Guardians of the Forest book. Morghur represents a very fascinating cultural aspect of the Beastmen, in that when he's alive, he tends to hang out in particular places when he's not running around. And wherever he hangs out becomes known as the Skull Cave, because the cave that he'll hang out in a little dark cave, which dens a lot of his senses to the world. And it said the cave is constantly shifting and moving, where like the walls run like wax and the ground moves like mud, even though it's supposed to be just hard stone. And Morghur sits there with his staff just drawing weird shapes in the ground beneath them, and they move and intricate with each other, and the walls show images of the end times and horrors beyond comprehension, whatever. And the Beastmen will go into the cave and try and endure. It's a trial where they walk in and they're just faced with Morghur's aura of change, and most of them will degenerate into chaos spawn. They will not have what it takes to survive in his presence, and they break down, turn into horrible monstrosities. But the truly gifted, those either favored by the gods or with enough will or tenacity or what have it, will endure and will likely gain some mutations that show that they're favored by the gods. Like the story it talks about the Beastman that survives, his skin like turns to like hard metal scales, and he gets all these other mutations, and he kills the other guy that's in there with him, and then he takes the other guy that turned to a chaos spawn and takes it back with him to use as a monster for a later on chapter. So Morghur is sort of this, very much like a god, where you go before him to see if you survive his attention, survive his gifts. And if you do, great. And Kralma is one of these individuals where he meets Morghur and survives. And what's interesting is that Kralma goes off to do his own stuff, but he ends up not being present at the Battle of Arden, and Morghur is killed. But Morghur seems to have known this was going to happen, which makes sense. He's in the ether. His sense of time is very all over the place. And Kralma, the moment it says that Morghur dies, Kromma's struck with a vision. And he immediately sees a vision of Morghur dying, but he also sees a vision of Morghur immediately being reborn somewhere else. And Kromma is now obsessed and on the warpath to find the infant Morghur before anyone else does and protect him so that he can be raised. And the thing that I love is this means Morghur has been reborn in like 2276, which gives him just enough time to grow up and be an adult for 2300 when shit hits the fan.
Yep.
Which means Morghur's going to be involved in the Great War, which I'm so fucking excited about. I mean, Kromma, he's basically just, he's in a way Morghur's nursemaid. And is a horrifying blind prophet, which if you've been watching Lawhammer, blind seers and prophets are the way to do it because they see the world in some really fucking fascinating ways that doesn't work well when you also have material vision.
Yeah. I have nothing to add to that. Perfect. A rare moment where I'm like, yep, that's it.
So all that to say, if I am very excited for the Beastman book, which is coming out probably this summer, I really hope they do what I think they're doing with it. Where Morghur's not in it yet, but there's all the build-up, and we get him in a later edition, maybe second or third edition as the timeline moves forward, and he gets a new mini, and I'll be very happy. Brock 6000, thank you for the super chat. Is Morghur tied to the world similar to how vampires are? No, he's actually almost the dead opposite.
Morghur's, bluntly, Morghur's a god from the Aether possessing a material host. Vampires are material.
Entirely.
Pretty much, yeah.
Purely. Vampires are often described as they are cut off. Their soul is just totally cut off.
They've got parts of their soul missing. The etheric sections.
Yep. Also, are beastmen compelled to protect/join him unthinkingly, or do they wish to, even if they mutate to spawn?
All of the above.
All the above. It's both. Like Andy talked about earlier, there are beastmen that will feel a compulsion to travel to where Morghur is from thousands of miles away, which is why he builds up these titanic war herds. But there are also a lot of beastmen that very consciously and actively seek him out for all sorts of reasons, either because they know that the fighting's going to be good, or they know that the gods watch him, or they worship Morghur and they wish to bask in his presence. All sorts of reasons. The beastmen are a very complex species. Baron von Bastard, since Morghur has pretty much changed itself, would a human Tzeentch follower try and follow his host? I don't think so, no.
Yeah, right.
Because they're not the same.
This is something that we've been sort of dancing around multiple times, but if Morghur suddenly starts, killing everything around him, which he does frequently and causes lots of blood to flow, doesn't that mean all the Khornate people should now immediately start trying to follow him as a person? No, that's not really how they work. Morghur's a different god. It's just different. The Morghur is not Tzeentch. Now, he is of the Aether, which means that he shakes the world wherever he goes. A god is doing something that the god shouldn't be doing, and reality itself is breaking around him. This isn't of Tzeentch. Tzeentch would also do this, but then any god, without the necessary control in place or following the rules, would do the same thing. So Morghur is the god of beastmen, for want of a simple way of putting it. And yes, that involves a lot of mutation and spawning of horror around him. The literal world around him is changing. You take a shot at him, it might turn into a butterfly or a frog. Who knows? That sounds like Tzeentch, but it isn't Tzeentch, it's Aether. It's the stuff of chaos. Now, Tzeentch is very much into this sort of stuff, so would that mean that perhaps a Tzeentch worshipper might try to use it? Oh, hell yes. Might try to use those beastmen? Oh, hell yes. Might even look at it and go, this is frickin' brilliant. Definitely. In the same way that a beastman that went wild and was murdering everything would impress a worshipper of Khorne, and a worshipper of Khorne might try to use it. But in no way does that mean they would try to follow it, per se.
Yeah, so I'll offer a counter version of what you asked by Von Bastard. So Morghur is such a vile interaction with the material in the etheric plane that he destroys all magic around him. no magic works anywhere near him, to the fact that he literally generates dispel dice just by his presence. And if any spell gets too close to him, the spell breaks apart and falls apart. Wouldn't Tzeentch followers look at him and go, that's too dangerous. That's the enemy. Magic does not work around him.
That is exactly the case, and I think that's a fine line to take. This is not Tzeentch. This is something really quite different. Mutation, for example, is all of the Chaos Gods, not just Tzeentch. Mutation is a core component of all the Chaos Gods, including Morghur.
Yeah, because in similar phrase, Nurgle mutates his followers. Well, doesn't that mean a Tzeentch follower would try and follow Nurgle? Like you're simplifying it. There are
too much there,
threads.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, Donoman, do you think Morghur has eaten any of the minor ancestor gods or dragon children of Cathay? I doubt it. It's not impossible, but I doubt it.
So, Dynaman, I suggest that you go catch the earlier parts of the stream. So when we finish, go back and watch the discussion concerning the ancestor gods, because we sort of delved into that a little bit there, and the chance of that being the case, I would suggest, is very low. On the dragon children, they just don't compare. They're a very different thing. Now, has he killed some along the route? Maybe, but I don't really think it matters. Because that's not what Morghur is. That would just be a tragedy that may have occurred in the past.
Yeah, the dragon children are not even divine in the slightest of senses.
Yeah.
They'd have. I don't think he'd care about them
Indeed,
at all.
they have very many things to say about the divinity of certain entities and their great dislike of them.
Peter MV1, has Morghur created a species with his corruption? Yeah, they're called Beastmen. And Chaos Spawn.
Beastmen and Chaos Spawn, but Beastmen in particular.
Desert X Fox, does Morghur have any relation to Moonclaw? That's a great question. We've actually done a stream on Morselid where we talked a lot about Moonclaw. And one of the things that we brought up at that stream that I stand by and really, really love is that one of the themes you see that's very interesting is Moonclaw very much represents mental corruption and a very etheric, like he is a concept of madness, whereas Morghur is a concept of mutation. They cover very similar threads, but there is a fine line between the difference.
Yeah, I think there is a strong possibility where you could build a host of different answers here. And I'll give you a couple of them just to at least set your mind off. And then possibly when we do a Moonclaw stream, we can dive into things a little bit more deeply. He could be a twin god. That would be one way of viewing it. Another one could be that he's effectively a greater demon of Morghur. That'd be another way of viewing it. Another one is that they perhaps are standing antithesis to each other. There's lots of different ways it could be pitched. And I think that you could build a good story for each of them. But is there a relation there? I think the answer is clearly yes, but that relation is not yet defined.
Yeah. Morghur Crescent, I hope after all this, the Shadowgave gave you a happy birthday talking about Morghur. Yeah, no, I've had a blast. I'm so
I've enjoyed
glad.
This one.
I'm honestly so glad to have this one in the pocket. To be very blunt about it.
It's one of those ones we've been wanting to do for a while because, it's always good to dive into the gods ones and take you step by step through until we reach the end and we say, yeah, he's a god.
Plus, it's another nail in the coffin that I keep forgetting we're building on Lorebeards, which is proving emphatically beyond any reasonable doubt that Latria is the Lady of the Lake. We just keep smashing that hammer on that.
The background keeps saying it.
Well, yeah. Fucking end times. Chris, happy birthday. So thank you. How do the Beastmen herds of Athel-Loren differ from that of other places culturally / socially to the magical nature and dangers of Athel-Loren? Is there any info on this? So, okay. That's actually a really interesting question. I'll say this. There are mentions of the Beastmen so the Beastmen did not get an 8th edition book, so they didn't get a lot of the cool expansion that we would have loved to see there. And a lot of the stuff about the Beastmen in 7th edition especially was almost pigeonholed on the Empire, and not really anything outside of it. Morghur doesn't play a huge role in the 7th edition Beastman book compared to the 6th edition book, where he's a pretty fucking big deal. So that being said, in the Wood Elf book, one of the interesting things that's talked about is that there are parts of the forest that seem almost sympathetic to the Beastmen, because the Beastmen are able to navigate past the Wood Elves don't know about.
Yeah.
The Beastmen are able to thrive in parts of Athel-Loren, which confounds and deeply irritates the Wood Elves, because it's almost as if there are parts of the forest that are working against them, because that is the corruption of Morghur. That there was a time where the Beastmen are able to live in almost kind of like an underbelly of the forest that the wood elves really struggle to deal with, which suggests that there is a unique relationship there, that there's something going on that's never really been deeply examined.
Yeah, I agreed completely. The Beastmen exist within Athel Loren, and I don't think they are necessarily culturally that much different to the Beastmen that you get in other places, because the Beastmen are often living in the most corrupt forests and similar in each part of not just the old world, but the Warhammer world as a whole. That being the case, I would suggest that they have a strong cultural link to each other, and that is ultimately sourced in where they came from. Much like the Skaven all have a cultural link to each other, regardless of what clan they are. And the Skaven link is the Horned Rat. The Beastman link is Morghur.
Yeah, what I will say, though, is if you wanted to run with a crazy idea, what I would not be asking what's really different about the cultural and social nature of the Beastmen and Athel Loren. I would be asking what is helping the Beastmen stay hidden in Athel Loren.
Yeah, I mean,
imagine like a hag tree forest spirit.
Yeah, I mean, you one of the things for all I just said that there's going to be a cultural link running all the way through. Look at the Skaven. They are completely different as we move clan by clan by clan by clan. And that's going to be the case with our Beastmen from different parts of the world as well, even though they are tied together through their link through Morghur, through the link through the Horned Rat, if we're talking on the Skaven side. We are going to have our equivalent to Clan Eshin, our equivalent to Clan Pestilence, our equivalent to all of these different groups for different parts of the world. And they're going to be different. And that's cool. At the moment, the Beastmen are almost a monolith. They've been given an army list and they've never been given individual cultures. And the only Beastmen we really have any detail for are old world Beastmen. That's it. And they've never really been sat down and expanded. And I think one day that will occur.
Yeah, your Athel Loren Warherd versus your Forest of Arden Warherd versus your Forest of Shadow Warherd versus your Drakmald Warherd.
But even that is very old world specific. I'm talking maybe your end-facing ones. If you take a look at the old Beastmen maps where they come from, they're all in the southern pole. The entire southern pole is full of Beastmen. They're clearly going to be completely different to what comes up in the north. And it would be really lovely to have a little bit of an insight into that.
Yeah, hopefully they've been doing a really good they've been doing a fairly okay job with the sub-factions in the Arcane Journals. We get 2 sub-factions per book. The Beastmen, it's going to be the first time we've seen sub-factions for fantasy.
Sub-faction at all.
So it's going to be really interesting to see what they go with. Baron Von Bastard, have any of the other Beastmen Legendary interacted with Morghur? Yes.
I think all.
Yeah, it's heavily implied that all of them have. The only one that might not have would have been Kazrak, maybe, because he's relatively young in like the grand scheme of things. But Malagor 100% has. Goros Warhoof is implied to have. Tarax, we don't really know when Tarax pops up. He just kind of like runs around.
Plus Minotaur, so
yeah, so like but Moonclaw, maybe. Moonclaw's also a relatively recent arrival, but and Morghur's, I would say Malagor would be a definite. Goros Warhoof would be a definite. Slug Tongue,
much like we did with the other one, Baron. I'm gonna pose this question differently, much like Sotek did with your last one. I'm instead going to say, how many of the Chaos Champion characters have dealt with the Chaos Gods?
That's there you go. That's a better way to put it.
You know, that's basically it.
Yeah, so probably all of them. Holy Artist.
Even if it's oblique and at a distance and without any real awareness, to a degree, all of them.
Holy Artist, but what if Morghur eats all the elven gods and goes on an eating frenzy of the other divines? Well, that would be an interesting what if, now wouldn't it?
Yeah, and it would. Plus, I think that's actually what we discussed too earlier, which is it would just ascend as one of the great powers in the Aether, and it would be in eternal war with all the others in the same way that the Chaos Gods constantly are. I don't think that this is an especially unlikely outcome. My biggest issue would be that hasn't happened in, say, Age of Sigmar, where you feel that very much should have.
Yeah, well, in AOS, he is a versus power. He's not friendly with the 4. He's an opponent to the 4.
And you know, raising the Horned Rat over the Beastman just shows the preference Games Workshop have for the Skaven.
Lame.
Holy Artist. Quite.
Well, no, so we already did that. Thank you very much. Lord Sarthanius, happy birthday, Sotek. Thank you. Grail Knights exist. Morghur. Snacks. Well, I mean, you say that. Grail Knights are hell of good design to kill Morghur. Like, they
I think so.
Perfect for killing Morghur. Ladriel chose very smartly with Grail Knights.
Oh, chose or crafted.
Crafted, yeah. She's I mean,
there's a Morghur. I need something to deal with that. It's time to create Captain America. Let's call him Captain Bretonia. Away you go.
I would say it is not subtle nor a surprise that when Ladriel saw Morghur coming, she said, "Gilles, get over here."
Yeah, totally.
Donna Man, I just thought Throck completes his campaign for Total War and eats Ariel. Haha, I've done finished it. Wait, why do I listen here? Yeah, I actually thought about that when they released that storyline, because it's a very fun, crazy over the top storyline of Throck going after Ariel to eat her. There would be a very funny situation where that would just literally draw Morghur to him. Yeah, that I will never forget.
It's a good one, Dynamano, because it's accurate.
Yeah, that is actually very funny. Yeah, that would be a thing. But that brings us pretty much only a tiny bit over time to the end of today's stream.
Okay, so I have a couple of loose things to say at the end. Number one, thank you all.
Thank you. Yes.
Happy birthday. In particular.
Thank you very much.
To the most scholarist of scholars and gentlemen, that is the Loremaster of Sotek. As to the subject he chose, I'm delighted that he did. We have taken you from viewing Morghur as just a Beastman special character, right at the beginning, maybe 300 years old, to going, wait a minute, no, he's older. He's a great spirit that apparently reincarnates again and again and again. What does this mean? Does this mean he's some sort of big spirit? Is he bigger than a greater demon even? And then as we progress through the lore and we go step by step through, it becomes clear that he's not just simply a greater demon. He's basically the Beastman god. He is the horned rat to the Beastman. And that is extraordinary because Games Workshop really forget that. Again and again and again in the Warhammer background. And no matter how much it may have sort of become a thing over in the Age of Sigmar side, in Warhammer, it kind of never did. We never had that moment in the end times where the equivalent of the horned rat does horned rat shit for Beastmen. The Beastmen are constantly sidelined, constantly pushed aside, almost minimized for all they got their own army lists. They're given a monoculture. They're given characters that they often push aside. They're not given a full army list for 8th edition. But nevertheless, all the seeds are very clearly sown. Morghur is a physical manifestation of the Beastman god. Likely the creator of the Beastman, likely an entity that predates the Cataclysm, or was one of the Chaos gods that initiated the starting point of the Cataclysm with the others. We have multiple examples of Chaos gods that died in the War of Heavens. We know this occurred, and 4 great powers rose out of that mess. Morghur is one of the ones that rose out of that mess also. Unlike Be'lakor, who was completely crushed by the Great Four, Tzeentch in particular, Morghur has got his own route out, or his own route of dealing with the material realm, and that is that he reincarnates within not his children, but apparently humanity, coming again and again, which speaks to a much bigger relationship between chaos and humanity as a whole. Morghur and humanity. Morghur changed humanity into something else. The same is the case for the Skaven. They came from a mixture of other species, but Morghur's directly tied and is birthed through them. And that's a fun story. Eventually, come the end times, Morghur should be responsible, as far as I'm concerned, with sacking the thing that he has been pursuing through all of his army list descriptions. And that is Athel Loren. He should have been there doing that. But that's not what happens. We get different stories. Morghur is sort of forgotten come the end times, much like all the Beastmen. And it, to this day, makes me exceedingly sad. Because Morghur is awesome. And I am exceedingly pleased that Sotek finally got it to be dragged out so that we can shine a little bit of light on a patch of darkness that Games Workshop, for the Warhammer world in particular, often forgot. Because we have an entity as interesting, as powerful, and as horrific as the Horned Rat is for the Skaven. But this is for the Beastmen. And the Beastmen are often just said to be, oh, they follow Chaos, or Chaos Undivided, or the Great Beast, or something. And they forget that they already have an entity sitting out there waiting to be used. And maybe, just maybe, in the old world, it will be.
Here's hoping. Yeah, man, I can't wait for Andy Lease to find out about his secret brother. Would the Callers of Corn work against Morghur's special aura type thing? As in the game, the Caller works, makes magic and magical effects null and void.
Yeah, so what we're looking at is, does the Caller of Corn work within the Aether and stop the Aether? And the answer is no. So the answer for the material realm equivalent of the Caller of Corn would be maybe. So some writers would view it and immediately say, yes, this will work. And some would say no. And we, as readers, might go, well, that conflicts. But I don't think it does. I think the answer for this will always be maybe. Sometimes it will, and sometimes it won't. Some might get through, and some will not. It's not as simple as yes and no, I think, in this instance.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with that, actually. Sarmelian, happy birthday, Sotek. Age of Shengyang Sigmar equals Nagash. What?
Well, the Age of Shanghai is basically what we built when we were doing the stream, which you should all watch if you haven't already. The Wednesday stream where we did the big what if with the Lizardmen, and we basically built the Age of Shanghai. Sigmar beings Nagash. That is
Psych, Morghur making the elves go beastman bullshit. Not all heroes wear cape.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Anyway, thank you all very much. This was super fun. I will once again be using my birthday to co-op. It'll be the actual day
on
of
Wednesday.
my birthday on Wednesday. So we'll do something I want to do, and me and Andrew are gonna figure that out here in just a minute. But appreciate you all so much for coming by. Thank you very much for all the sweet messages. I really do very much appreciate it. I'm really happy to have Morghur in the completed section, which is so terrifyingly tiny compared to the to-do section. But we're making progress.
And now we're at the end. I'll turn my headphones right way around because I no longer need to worry about this stupid thing.
Right. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you guys on Wednesday, and it'll be here on my stream, and then Sunday will be over on Andy's, and we'll talk to y'all then.
Thanks for watching. Know what we're doing on Sunday. Well, decide.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. All right.
See you all very soon. Bye-bye.